underneath, right?
Before we begin, for those of you out there, in front of me on the desk are two piles of papers. One is tonight's agenda. You're free to come up and get a copy. The other is a one-page summary of how we conduct these meetings. So if you want to come up now, before we begin, you might go. We all right? Is the power source plugged in? I mean, down on the floor.
Yeah, it's on, it's just frozen. We go past the whole screen. Same thing. I'm gonna keep trying, you guys.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm giving it a minute.
In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board, town hall, and mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually, indicating that this meeting would take place at the town hall at 7 p.m. on Monday, May 20, 2019.
Mary Beth? Here. Craig Federer?
Here.
Joyce Siegel? Here. Wolfgang Tutores?
Here.
Jerry Wenzel?
Here.
Vice Chairman Jessica Blatt?
Here.
Chairman Joseph Stein?
Here. Couple of announcements before we begin. First, our recording equipment does not seem to be working, so if anyone needs a copy of the transcript from tonight, our court reporter is here, and you can reach out to him and get a copy of the transcript, which will cost you some money.
Right.
Right, the second announcement is that if you have a copy of tonight's agenda, under the memorializations, there's one crossed out, it's the wrong one. The Feldman matter will be memorialized tonight. The Vogel matter will not be memorialized tonight. And finally, matter number 2 on the agenda, 30 Southern Slope Drive, Ryboud. That case will not be heard tonight. So if you're here on the Ryboud case, that's 30 Southern Slope Drive, unless you are staying for the enjoyment of it, you can leave. Okay, so we'll start with the approval of minutes. We have one set of minutes. These were the minutes of the meeting of May the 6th. All the changes have been made, yes? Irene? Okay. Any changes or corrections? If not, is there a motion? Who is here on the 6th?
Mary, Craig, Wolfgang, Kevin, Jessica, Joe.
One of those whose names was called will have to make the motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes of 5/6.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the minutes of May the 6th, 2019 have been approved. Next, we're doing memorializations. As I indicated, the first one is not being heard tonight. So the first one we're doing is calendar 3683-19, Alexander and Irina Peckel at 19 Reeve Circle in Millburn. Are there any additions or corrections to the memorialization that was circulated? Who's eligible here?
Mary, Craig, Jessica, Joe, Wolfgang, Kevin.
Right, those are the only people who can make a motion or be heard on the Peckel matter, calendar 3683. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve the memorializing resolution in that case?
Move approval of calendar 3683-19.
Is there a second?
Mary Beth?
Yes.
Craig Federer?
Yes.
Wolfgang Tutores?
Yes.
Jerry Wenzel?
Yes.
Jessica Blatt?
Yes.
Joseph Stein?
Yes. Who's eligible on Lalonde?
Same.
Same people voted yes? All right, this is calendar 3685-19, Judson and Zoe Lalonde at 84 Myrtle Avenue. Any additions or corrections to the circulated resolution? If not, is there a motion on Lalonde?
Move approval of calendar 3685-19.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mary McNabb.
Yes.
Rick Fleetner.
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres.
Yes.
Kevin Wenzel.
Yes.
Jessica Black.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. And who's eligible on Feldman?
Same.
All right, next is calendar 3687-19, Jacob and Robin Feldman at 153 Highland Avenue. Any additions or corrections to the circulated memorializing resolution? If not, is there a motion to approve by one of those whose names was called?
I move approval of 3687.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mary McNabb.
Yes.
Rick Fleetner.
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres.
Yes.
Kevin Wenzel.
Yes.
Jessica Black.
Yes.
Joseph Steinberg.
Yes. Okay, there are 3 applications on the agenda tonight. As indicated, 30 Southern Slope Drive is not being heard tonight. The first one is Fidelco ROI LLC. Counsel?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thomas J. Satiri from Lindenbury, McCormick, Estabrook, and Cooper for the applicant Fidelco ROI LLC. This is an application for site plan and variance relief for the construction of a 10,593 square foot office building on block 1207, lots 15 and 14, commonly known as 251 Essex and 257 Essex Street, right behind here. I have 2 professional witnesses, Mr. Richard Keller and Ms. Nancy Dougherty, an engineer and architect who will testify. By way of brief historical background, as you may have gathered from the application, this application, in most aspects, was before the planning board a little over a year ago and was approved. The owner applicant at that time, after some consideration, decided to speak to his next door neighbor, and both basically agreed that they can make use of both their lots and improve them together. And so now this application is before this board on a little bit different scale. And the reason it's before this board is because on lot 15, there are 2 structures and 2 principal uses. So we need a variance from this board for that. There are representatives of the applicant here if you care to ask any questions afterwards about the nature of the project. And I'd like to have Mr. Keller and Ms. Dougherty sworn in, and then we can take their testimony.
It's fine.
I'm sorry.
Any questions of counsel at this time?
Swear together.
Yes, I do.
Nancy, last name is Dougherty, D-O-U-G-H-E-R-T-Y.
Richard Keller, K-E-L-L-E.
Thank you. Mr. Keller, you've appeared before this board before, correct?
Yes, I have.
Okay, can you explain, though, for the record briefly, what your educational and professional background is, please?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey, licensed as an engineer in 1989, and a planner in 1990. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Rutgers University with concentration in water resources and environmental engineering. And I also hold a master's degree in architecture with a concentration in urban planning and design, and that is from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, where I was also an adjunct professor for the graduate and undergraduate divisions for approximately 11 years. I've appeared before this board, the planning board, as well as approximately 110 boards throughout the state of New Jersey. And we've provided professional consulting services to a number of planning boards and boards of adjustment, as well as planners and engineers. My licenses are in effect as of today.
Thank you very much. I offer Mr. Keller as a professional engineer
I'm a planner.
and plan planner, yes.
And his qualifications are accepted.
Thank you. Mr. Keller, can you explain briefly the engineering aspects of this project, particularly in what is proposed for those 2 lots?
Yep. The first thing I'd like to do is make one correction to Mr. Security's intro. Is the lot that we're putting these lots together, but lot 14 is that one that actually has the 2 uses, the 2-family and the garage, the former garage restaurant office building. I'll do A1 is my first and only exhibit, other than the drawings you have before you, and that is a satellite photo with imagery date from July 30, 2017. North is up, and it's to a scale of 1:40. And you can see on the site, this was taken back when the site originally was 14 and 15, but there was a minor subdivision that was part of the prior approval where we grabbed approximately 2,000 square feet from the site where the common lot is, and we cleaved it onto then lot 15 and removed what was the second structure on the corner lot 16. That was the sort of dilapidated, had a nice patina, but it was a pretty dilapidated florist building. That was removed. The applicant received approval before the planning board to develop lot 15, which is the half on the right, and construction was started. If you've been by there, you can see it is currently a construction site where construction is halted. Again, that was approved by the that prior building was approved by the planning board in 2018. That approval, previous approval, which stayed on the one side and sort of butted up close to the garage office building which sits at the back. That project required 35 parking spaces and was providing 11 on-site spaces and had a deficiency of 24 spaces. The applicant agreed to buy parking permits, which according to the ordinance therefore obviated the need for variance relief. The previous application on that half also received a height variance, and that was to permit a height of 30.67 where 28 feet is required. That 2.67 foot deviation is less than the 10% in excess of the allowable height, thus classifying the variance as a C variance. If it was 10% above allowable, it would be 30.8. We're at 30.67, so we're coming in under the 10% over, which would be a D variance, but we still request. We've gotten received C variance relief for the original approval. I would point out in 2008, the prior owner received the same height variance for an elevated retail building with apartments on the second floor. That proposed use turned out to be unmarketable, and the owner at that time scrapped the plans and then later sold it to ROI, who then, as I said, did the subdivision and development. Lot 14 on the left, that currently contains. That contains the garage restaurant, which is at the back of the property and at the back of a neighbor terrace. And on the left side is a two-family dwelling. Since there were two principal uses on a single lot, the Board of Adjustment approved that site plan for the garage and two-family house back in 2008. The restaurant was closed a few years later and has been vacant ever since. The original approval for the garage restaurant included a 27-car parking variance since no on-site parking was required. And while under construction, as indicated, we started construction. We were dealing with some underpinning on some adjacent walls. And then as we continued to look at it, my client sort of realized there could be a synergy in creating a better building on his site and also lop in and adaptively reuse the former garage restaurant at the back of the site, thereby improving the appearance of that, using the existing building to provide more parking and more versatile second floor space. I'll let the architect discuss some of the nuances of that. I did want to point out that in the area, we're in kind of a unique area. This site, which now that the buildings are down, it's very easy to see. You have without any building on the site, you have a great view of the power switching station from JCP&L. You have a great view into the back of the DPW and the retaining walls that are associated with it. It's a site that certainly needs something to replace the missing tooth in what could be a nice mile along Essex Street. To the west of us is we've got the two-family house. We've got the Millburn French Cleaners and a second floor spa. We've got a two-family house. We've got what was D'Amico, and now it's Capri Restaurant, an insurance agent, and the entrance is into the DPW. Across the street, there's a series of one and some two-family homes that actually form the dead-end portion of Essex Street, and they, as well as they front for a few commercial spaces, the doctor's office, and the Cafe Saigon, which actually recently received planning board approval to put a second floor on, and that sort of masks the parking lot P5 that sits further to the south of that. We show, this also is the location of that parking lot 5, parking lot P1, which has 86 metered spaces, and P2, which is the parking deck, which has 39 metered spaces, as well as another 370 spaces on the upper levels. 300 spaces on the upper levels are available. To the west of the site, across from DPW, is where we have parking that's for 24-hour, as well as resident parking, business parking. Some of that is also at the back location of P1. So we're well situated between both public meter parking, and we're situated well between areas where business and residential overnight permits parking is available. Go to our survey of the property. Again, we showed the whole area. You can see that at one time there were some existing buildings on what was the Driscoll site before my client bought it. Actually, both sites I think were at some point Driscoll owned, but there were a number of buildings on it. There was an old building which was the florist that was removed as part of the new building and part of the subdivision, and we essentially had a vacant lot with the two-story block garage, restaurant building, and the two-family house forming that property. There was approximately, the site nicely graded from back to front. It had about 4.6 feet of change over 158 feet, and that actually helped us in doing, engineering a building that would be DEP compliant. One of the most notable aspects about this site is we are located in the floodplain of the west branch of the Romeway River. Unfortunately, we're stuck with using the most recent adopted flood data from DEP is the 1974 study. Unfortunately, it's never been updated, so that's the flood elevation of data that we have to use. And according to that data, in a 100-year event, such as Hurricane Floyd or Irene, the flood elevation comes roughly to the back of the property. We know that that never happened in Floyd or Irene or Sandy, but that's the modeling that we have to use. And accordingly, according to that adopted study, the 100-year flood line rises to approximately elevation 141, which is at the retaining wall in the back. That's nearly 7 feet above the curb line of the street. Based upon DEP criteria, the flood hazard design elevation for some safety factor is 142, and therefore when you build a building, the lowest habitable floor is set at 143, which is the curb line at 134 and a half. So it means the first floor of any habitable space on this building needs to be 8.5 feet above the curb line. And so you can imagine why the previous application and approval for an elevator retail failed. It's really hard to have retail that's 8.5 feet above the curb line. And so accordingly, the only thing that really can be done with this site is to develop an office building where we have parking, sheet 3, for essentially the whole lower level of the new building is parking. There's an entry vestibule and storage. This is allowed by DEP, but it has to be non-habitable space. So the only thing that's allowed in that space is no desk, there's no welcome. As you walk in, there's a button for the elevator, or you go up the stairs. That's all the DEP will allow us to have in the new portion of the building. The previous design, which was located only on the one property, the right side, lot 15, did receive DEP approval, which is how we started construction. We obviously recognize now that we are conjoining the two properties with a building that will reach out and embrace and use the second floor of the office building of the former garage restaurant. We recognize that that will trigger a new DEP application. We're basically just waiting for this board's determination to submit that for DEP approval. With regard to the zoning on the property, we're in the B4 zone, so we're allowed to have 100% lot coverage and 100% building coverage, 0 setbacks, and no surprise, we're compliant with most of the zoning criteria. The area we need, as shown on the site data box, the area we need variance relief from is for the building height, and I'll get into that much more depth, where 28 feet is permitted, 28 feet of 2 stories, we're proposing 2 stories, but at 30.67 feet. And we need variance relief for parking, as well as variance for variance for a loading space. The proposed development involves a new building footprint of 9,146 square feet. the adapted former garage restaurant. I keep calling it former garage restaurant because I don't want to say the garage because the garage might get people confused with the parking garage we're proposing. So the former restaurant space has 1,447 square feet with a total office area, total building coverage, excuse me, of 10,592 square feet. The two-family home has a footprint of 1,016. That's a total of 11,609 square feet, or 90% of the lot coverage. There's another 2,009 square feet of pavers that define this entry down this corridor. I think the architect will show perspective, will show how that works. But down that entryway into the back building, where the garage restaurant was, there's pavers that connect those two. There's a fence that divides off. There's privacy to the two-family house, and there's an area at the back to accept people coming out of the lower garage up and into the garage restaurant, the former garage restaurant building. To meet the DEP regulations as indicated, the first floor of the new building will be used for parking and entry vestibules and limited storage. No mechanical equipment can be located below the design flood elevation 142. So there's for storage, but there's no mechanicals in this area. Stormwater is managed by an on-site underground storage with an overflow to the town's, will be our sheet number 4. We're basically picking up all the roof leaders on the site. They're coming into large diameter pipes that are buried in the under the parking garage, and then a meter structure that prevents any overflow going directly into the town storm sewer, so there's no washing of water over the curb line. We are detaining all that water, so there's no net increase in the rate of runoff with development, and the township engineer has approved the stormwater management plan. For the purposes of parking, as I indicated, the office has 9,146 square feet. The adaptive garage building is 2,447 square feet. That's a total office area of 11,593 square feet, which is in our zoning table. Add one space per 250 square feet, that yields a requirement of 46.4 spaces. The two apartments in the two-family home are between 750 and 1,000 square feet, so their requirement under ordinance is 1.5 spaces per apartment, so that's 3 cars is required for the residential use. 3 cars plus the 47 means we have a total requirement of 50 cars on the site. I would point out that one of the effects of the new design, and one of the reasons it was more efficient to create more parking is the new design actually increases the amount of parking as a function of the office area. The previously approved design had about 8,692 square feet. And provided 11 spaces on site. That was 1 space for every 790 square feet. The proposed design has 11,593 square feet and 19 spaces, which was 1 per 610 square feet. So we're not quite meeting the 1 per 250, which nobody usually does in the downtown, but we're certainly going from 790 to 610, which is closer to the 250. So all in all, on balance, this is actually an improvement in the parking situation. And I'll do some more comparisons when I get back up the planning groups on how this is a better resolution in terms of any impact from the downtown parking. Before I turn it over to Nancy, just to recap, we will need preliminary and final site plan approval tonight. We'll need a waiver of the environmental impact statement. We will need, and basically this site has been granted a number of EIS waivers over the time since it is fully developed site with no environmentally sensitive areas, and essentially it's being developed within the guidelines of the ordinance. We also need a building height variance, which we see as a C1 variance. We also are requesting a deviation from the parking requirement, although the applicant is proposing to purchase parking permits for any deficiency, which would obviate the need for the parking variance. And finally, we need a variance from section 607.1, where 1 loading space is required, none are provided, so the deficiency of 1. So I think I'll turn it over to Nancy, unless there are any questions on the engineering of the site, which I think is pretty basic and straightforward. I'll turn it over to Nancy, and then when Nancy finishes telling you about the architectural solution and how there was a synergy created between looping that in, I'll come back and talk about the planning aspects.
I'd like to hear some testimony on the loading dock waiver.
Well, I was gonna do that in my planning, but certainly, I can do that now. In terms of office buildings generally do not generate, large amounts of loading, certainly much less than a restaurant would. Most of the deliveries tend to come through FedEx or Amazon or UPS trucks. They're already on the street network, they generally, park in the street. One of the advantages, though, we are getting rid of 4 curb cuts on the property, which is one of my positives later. We're getting rid of 4 curb cuts, so there'll be, increased allowance for, meter, for the town to put meter parking, but certainly there'll still be enough allowance in the area if there's other curb cuts for trucks to, do as they usually do, which is park in the street and access the building. Again, most office buildings generally receive, photocopy paper, documents delivered by UPS. Those guys, I have yet to find a UPS driver that we can get to pull on site and use an on-site loading space. They generally are used to parking in the street. This is an area of the town, it's not on Millburn Avenue between Main and Lackawanna. This is an area where those trucks can easily pull over to the curb and get access to the building. So there is none provided. We think it's a C2 variance because it presents a better alternative than carving out a curb opening onto the site. In the B4 district, we try to discourage curb openings because they interrupt the pedestrian flow and they create safety issues. Obviously, where we have to cut across, we do, but to add another curb cut where we think that it's not necessary and it would unlikely be used, we think it's a better planning alternative to not provide it and use the street, which is what pretty much everybody else does. And again, I would point out it's certainly an improvement over the current condition because restaurant deliveries are far more frequent than office deliveries.
Any other questions of this witness? Engineering testimony from board members? Anyone in the audience have any questions on the engineering aspects of this witness? Counsel, your next witness.
Can you briefly explain your educational professional background to the board, please?
Sure. I'm a licensed architect in 8 states, including New Jersey. My architectural degree is from Columbia University. I've been licensed for 20-plus years. I am a principal at Studio 1200, located on Millburn Avenue in Short Hills. I've testified before multiple boards, including this board, on more than several occasions.
And your license is still current?
And my license is still current and valid, yes.
Welcome, Ms. Dougherty.
Qualifications as an architect are accepted.
Thank you.
Okay, so as Rich mentioned, this is, we have created something that is really, there are many similarities to what was presented before and was approved. But now we have combined the existing structure that was designed with the garage restaurant building to create a slightly larger building. It has approximately 4,000 square feet of additional space over what was previously designed. So I'm just going to start running through sort of how the plan works, and then we can get into the exterior aesthetics. One thing I want to point out as we start, the previous building had actually the parking, floor above it, and a mezzanine. This new plan just has the parking and 1 floor above it. So the mezzanine is not in this plan, and that had to do with the site elevations, which were mentioned previously. So on the street level, the way that the building works, on the east side, you come in, there's an entry vestibule. As was mentioned, we're not allowed to have any sort of habitable space here according to the DEP. So there is an elevator, there's a stair, and there's some storage, and then there's also access into the parking garage. Within the parking garage area, we have a total of 19 parking spaces here, and they're all shown here. We were able to, when we combined the lots to get, as was mentioned, we went from 11 spaces to 19 spaces. The existing two-family house that's here, with the apartments remains, as does the fence. As we go through into the back of the parking garage, there's another staircase that was created. We're putting in a Lula elevator so that we have full accessibility to the garage restaurant building that it did not have before. The existing, and then the garage is 3.5 feet down from, the parking garage is 3.5 feet down from the garage restaurant building. So when you come in this garage, you can either go up half a flight, taking the stairs, or going up in this Lula elevator, and that gets you up to the level of the garage restaurant building. So it makes it fully accessible. Once you get into this existing structure, which is at the back, it pretty much remains, the footprint remains as is. There's an existing staircase in that building, if you had ever been there when it was open, and there's a restroom there, which that will remain because that's existing construction. So that's pretty much the layout on the ground level. As we move up into the building, looking at drawing PB2, on the upper floor, one of the things that was requested was we make the building as flexible as possible. So on the second floor, again, we have an elevator and a stair that brings you up to a vestibule and then into open office space. There are bathrooms, so fully handicap accessible new bathrooms that are sort of stacked along the east side of the building, closest to the electric substation. Here you see the stair and the elevator, again providing full accessibility to the back of the building and also to sort of this knuckle portion of the building. This, again, is the existing footprint of the garage restaurant building that remains as is. That's approximately 1,000 square feet. The stair and the two bathrooms remain in that back portion of the building. So the idea is that we could have one tenant in this building, we could have two tenants, and that no matter where the tenants are, the building is fully accessible on the second floor. And then the apartment building remains. In terms of the exterior aesthetics, and at this point, I'm just going to put up the rendering. It's much easier to see it this way. So
That'll be A2, the rendering?
the rendering would be A2. Yes, thank you. So the design aesthetics are very similar to what was presented before. It was always intended to be sort of a handsome brick building that would relate to the common lot building that's on the corner. So a combination of brick on the exterior, some steel elements, very large windows, so it feels sort of loft-like, but broken down with panes so that it relates to the scale of the street. And as was mentioned, this is the existing paver walkway that takes you right now back to the garage building. You'll see back here, this is actually the existing garage restaurant building back here. We have just ghosted in the existing two-family house so that you can understand where it is relative to the rest of it, but also you can see the existing garage restaurant building back there. One of the garage doors for the garage restaurant building remains so that remains part of the character of that rear portion of the building, and the idea is that it will have sort of an industrial feel to it. So again, similar elements to what had been originally included. So as you're coming along Essex Street this way, the main entrance to sort of the front portion of the building is here. So the entry doors that take you into the elevator and the stairs. Because the ordinance stipulates that everything has to be closed on the facade, you will see here we have a combination of planters and the opportunity to create some landscaping here. And then there is a garage door, so this will be the entrance into the parking area. There's exterior lighting that has been shown on our drawings, which I can speak to. There's a modest canopy here that would be a metal canopy, sort of on suspended cables here. There would be signage that is above this canopy on the right-hand side, and then also a building sign as you approach the main entrance. Then on the left-hand side, the brick wraps around on both sides of the building, so it wraps around on this side facing common lot, and the brick returns on the other side facing the existing apartment building. When we get to the back portion here, where we have the new staircase and the new Lula elevator that provides access to the garage restaurant building, we have sort of a glass transition piece so that we can transition from the new brick building to the existing garage restaurant building. The materials on the garage restaurant building will remain as they are, so there's some siding above the brick that was repurposed brick that was on that building, so those materials will remain. details for the signage, I'll just run through. So we are in the B4 zone. The allowable sign area is 20% of the allowable area, sign area. We're well below that. We're at 1.2%. So with the proposal of the signage that goes on top of the canopy and the signage that goes at the entrance here. So those are the signage calculations. The signage up here is intended to be individually letters that are shown here, and then the sign at the building entrance would just be a mounted sign on the brick. Going to PB5, again, what you already have in the package. This is just showing, this is actually the rear elevation of the building, and this is the east elevation, so this is the one you can't see in the rendering, but the front portion of it, until the building turns, is all brick and with the same tall windows that you see in this rendering. Down at the bottom on this page, it shows the actual light fixtures. So there's a combination of the F1 fixtures, they're actually small fixtures that go underneath the canopy. The F2 A and B fixtures are these fixtures that go either provide up and down light or down light right under the canopy where we have the landscaping. And then the final fixture type is an F3, which provides some accent lighting above the main entrance, and then also where the garage door is. And just the last, this will be exhibit A3. So this exhibit is just showing, this is actually just the civil engineering first floor, the ground floor site plan, and just showing a couple of additional items that we wanted to point out. So this is actually the streetscape that we've mocked up, pulling things down to scale relative to this plan. So starting on the right-hand side, we have the common lot building. This is where the courtyard is. This is the proposed new version of our building at 251, 257. This is the existing apartment building here. This is the sort of entry back into the current garage restaurant building, and then the buildings that are off of our property to the left. We wanted to point out that one detail that we would like to introduce here is that right now there is a white vinyl fence that is next to the existing apartment building. And the intention would be to, which you can see in this photograph, I don't know if everybody can see it, but, so the intention would be to replace that white vinyl fence with a fence, a stained wood fence that's more akin to what's at common law. So something to sort of dress up that element and make it relate a little more coherently to what's going on further east on the street. So those are the sort of specifics of all of the drawings. And again, I think that the design intent was really to, similar to what was presented before, was to present sort of a handsome brick building that would relate to the downtown, that would be well detailed, that would be timeless, and that would create some presence on Essex Street, you know, to relate to the scale of what's already there. As was mentioned, the top of the building, we are at 30.67 feet, so we need a C variance for that, but it's within the 10% over the allowable height of 28 feet. I'm happy to go back through any of the building statistics if people would like me to do that. I think they pretty much got covered in terms of the building coverage.
Are there any questions from board members of this witness?
Where do the people in the two-family house park?
Where they park currently, excuse me?
I can go after that.
Yeah, on the left.
I have one question.
Sure.
The entrance to the garage, is that an entrance or an entrance and an exit?
It's an entrance at, you mean right here where this is?
Yes.
It's an entrance and an exit,
The garage door.
the garage door.
And how wide is that opening?
The actual opening of it, let me just check.
18 feet.
Hold on.
18 feet.
right at the entrance.
I have another question, but maybe it's for Rich. The existing garage restaurant,
Yes,
will that be office or?
it will be, there's certain kinds of office that are permitted,
Right.
so it will be, the office type that's permissible in the zone.
On the ground floor?
Yes, correct,
Okay.
yes.
The pathway that leads up to the garage restaurant area, is that permissible to park in there? Or no? It'd strictly just be a
It will just be a
walkway?
pedestrian walkway,
Okay.
yes, definitely.
Is there another curb cut for the house? Or on,
No, so the existing curb cut for the house, the end of the property line is just to the left of the
Right.
stairs, there's a little bit of an alleyway, but that's it. So,
So there will be no curb cut for the house?
that's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions from board members?
Is there a second floor in the garage restaurant?
Yes,
Is that second floor?
yes,
Okay.
yep, right.
Um,
Yes, it's 1,000 square feet of space, right.
1,000 square feet on each floor?
No, the second floor is 1,000 square feet, the first floor is slightly larger. The first floor of the garage restaurant building is 1,447 square feet, and the second floor of the garage restaurant building is 1,000 square feet. So and it's because it sets back, and actually there's mechanical equipment up here on the roof of the garage restaurant building. So that will all remain as is in terms of footprint.
Do you think there'll be one tenant in that space, or is it designed for multiple tenants in the garage restaurant space?
So, we charged with, and the team really worked pretty hard to make it so that it was as flexible as possible. So you'll see on the second floor that we have doors indicated here, and there's a dotted hallway that says future corridor. So it could be that one tenant takes all of this space, including the first floor of the garage restaurant building, or one tenant takes everything, or one tenant takes the garage restaurant building and another tenant takes all of this. So, and then we could make it accessible in all three scenarios, fully accessible.
Has there already been contemplation of the use of this as like a shared work space or no?
There've been a lot of discussions, about different
Permutations of what can be done.
permutations, but,
I'm just trying to think for parking.
right,
I mean, obviously one tenant's nice, but,
right,
if you have a shared workspace, your parking intensity increases significantly.
sure. I mean, right now, it's traditional office space is the way that it was considered.
The original approval, well, because the main building, the office is on the second floor.
Yes,
Okay. So the new building that exists in the restaurant
yes,
will be office space on the first floor.
correct.
Is not permitted use,
The permissible kinds of office space.
you don't allow office space for zone office.
There are certain uses, so sort of real estate and a few other
Okay.
uses.
Yeah, those are allowed.
Right, I may not be using the.
All right, just wanted to make sure we
Right,
have
terminology.
Right.
Yeah, right, thank you.
The first floor would be permitted uses only.
permitted office like real estate.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Any other questions from board members? Anyone in the audience have any questions for this witness? Come forward, identify yourself. You don't have to be sworn, but you do have to ask a question.
Carrie Heller, 343 Millburn Avenue. Hi. The facade, if you'd start from the corniche coming down, what are we looking at in terms of that portion going to the brick, the relief, the detail, the windows, operable? Could you give a description?
You wanna know,
Well, what's the material?
so
What are
it's
we looking
brick,
at?
right?
On the top is brick as well?
This is all brick, it's all brick. Up until here, this would be coping, so there'd be metal
Right,
coping on the
that's my
top.
question. Okay,
And then just at this very top piece, and then all of this is brick detailing.
right.
These will be a combination of, fixed and operable windows, so, they're tall windows, so in all likelihood, the whole window will not be operable, but a portion of it, which is the way they're rendered right now.
And you have lighting, it looks like uplighting.
Right, so there's
And
uplighting
down.
shown across the face of there.
Probably an LED, something sweeping across the facade of the building.
Well, they're shown on our plans, and they're shown on the rendering here, so there's a couple of locations where where the pilasters are, where there would be uplighting.
This is a nice detailed question if you'd consider sweeping it across a very pretty building rather than just having it, it looks like, is that a column that each light is?
These are right. so
I see the tie
pilasters.
buckles in between,
Right,
but just to consider a sweep of the light. We've tried that at the courtyard, We're working with some access points that we don't have that you might have, but it might be attractive. What is the black, that's the steel with the tie buckle? How far will that extend out, the canopy?
2 feet,
So small.
right, it's small.
I may have missed when Rich testified, but the garage door will remain closed or open during the business day? Prior application, it was represented.
I can talk about that.
Okay, are you getting back up later?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that landscaping? I'm guessing I'm seeing in either side of the garage door, something
So
green?
those are planters, right, that are called out to be small
Recessed?
planters,
Right.
yep, and there's a slight setback in the brick detail.
Right, very nice. Is there signage? And maybe Rich had talked
So
to that, or will?
there's signage there's signage above here, and there's signage at the door, and then there's, existing signage on the garage restaurant
Can
building.
you show me? There's signage above where?
There's not, maybe you can't see it from there, it's a little faint, but, there is signage above the canopy,
Oh, for the address?
correct.
But not for specific tenants? Is signage permitted as part of over that canopy to come back at some later date? Right now, we've been looking at a very large garage sign over from the courtyard for many, many years, which we haven't been real happy about. And in fact, I think this board heard an application on that post garage sign going up many years ago. Is it possible, under the zoning ordinance as permitted, to put signage above that canopy? Is that considered second floor or is that first floor?
There's a height limit, but we're within that height limit, so
Right.
the signage is permissible.
I'm not questioning that sign, I'm just questioning whether there might be additional nomenclature sign for additional tenants somewhere down. Well,
We
first,
haven't, we haven't proposed that at the moment.
a question whether for Rich or for the board attorney, whether that's first floor or
Well,
second
at
floor.
this point,
Well, that'll be a question for the zoning officer to determine in the
Yeah.
first instance.
the resolution will contain a provision that any signage must comply with municipal ordinances. If they don't, they'll have to come back to the zoning board.
Well, then my question here to this board is, does the signage over the canopy on the right-hand side, is that a variance or is that a permitted first floor sign?
And that'll be a determination of the zoning officer. The board will not interpret that until after the zoning officer does.
So let me just clarify, the signage here where the canopy is actually below the second floor level, so as far as we understand it, it meets the zoning requirements currently.
So signage in theory, whatever the zoning ordinance permits by the length of the building, by the height, potentially could be additional signage under that. I mean,
Whatever is permissible, yes.
okay.
I mean, we're way under the allowable signage, right? We're at 1.2%, and we're allowed to go up to 20%, so,
I have no objection, I just
Right.
wanted to know whether the interpretation was
Right.
first floor, so I'm
Yeah.
hearing it as first floor.
right.
The curb cut, and maybe Richard already spoke to, or will the apron is what width as compared to the width of the garage door itself?
I'm gonna let Rich speak to all
You
those.
speak to that, okay.
elements.
Did Rich, or will it be spoken to, and we had talked about this at a prior planning board application going back even to this board 10 years ago. I believe, actually it was planning board, the garage, the common lot also has a driveway. I'm gonna just ask if Rich perhaps would speak to that as to not being part of your application, or, okay. Will the architect or Rich speak to possibility of street trees? Would that be you or someone else? Rich, okay, we'll leave that be. We'll let Rich get back up and,
Right, and then you can
and if it
ask
goes
him-
back to the
you
architect,
can
I'll ask
him
Rich.
lots of questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Heller, before you leave, I just want to place on the record that I know that you've submitted correspondence addressed to the chairman. I've advised the board secretary that that letter should be placed in the file, and it was not circulated to the chairman or anyone on the board because a letter is not appropriate because there's no ability to cross-examine. So if there was anything in your letter that you want to bring to the board's attention, since you're here, you should do so. That way, the applicant will have the opportunity through its attorney to cross-examine you.
I think everything has been brought up. That was the
Okay.
intent. Thank you.
Just wanted you to be aware of the fact no one's seen your letter.
Thank you.
One quick question, Joe, before you, the door that's on the garage restaurant, will that remain as an operable garage door, or will it remain closed?
The intention, I mean, the intention is that it's operable at the moment, and it will have the ability to be operable. It will be determined by the tenant. The man door, if you will, or the
Right.
people door, is also there. So that is the actual egress door coming out of that first floor space. But the intention was to leave that garage door so that it has sort of that industrial aesthetic.
Next witness.
Good call, Mr. Keller. You can address the planning issues and Mr. Heller's question.
One of the things I want to point out first is that on the rendering, the renderer left the curb cut in. That curb cut is actually on the Casey and Keller plan. I'm pretty sure, yeah, we're calling for that to be replaced with full face curb. So that will no longer be accessible to vehicles to drive
You're
up.
talking, let's,
The driveway to the building in the back.
to the west of the building.
That currently exists between the proposed building and the two-family home. Is currently, it's actually not been used as, well, it's been used since the garage restaurant went out of business. It's been occasionally used as a parking space, but the intent was to close that, depress curb with full-face curbing, bring an apron up to the top of the curb, so that would no longer provide vehicular access to the slot immediately adjacent to the east of the two-family home.
So even though that garage door on the building at the back is operable and may remain operable for some future tenant, they have no access to that garage from the front.
Correct, similar to the Hills, where they have garage doors that open onto the restaurant. It's really an aesthetic decision, providing versatility and an attractive element at the back, and it harkens back to the nature of the garage. But there's no intent to ever bring a vehicle back and use that as a garage space. I would also, I guess just touching on a couple of clarifications, because they're kind of more functional engineering. The intent was that the ordinance requires that any first floor parking must be completely screened by architectural elements. And we certainly didn't want to leave this open 24/7 so that it could be seen into that area. There was some discussion at the planning board about safety. We indicated at that time that there would be a low chirp that would be emitted when the door was going up or coming down. And generally, since on an office building, you'll often get people who arrive in concentrated areas of 8:30 to 9 o'clock. That would be set on a timer, so each time it opens, it would stay open for probably 10 to 15 minutes. So that would allow for people to get in. There wouldn't be any, it wouldn't be as though each car turning in, we have to wait for the garage to go up and down. Once that early morning influx is over, that garage would, the door would be on a timer and would go down. Certainly at nights it would be closed. It could also be similarly arranged for evenings where you could have an extended open time of 15 minutes or so, so that when everyone's leaving the office at roughly 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever. I haven't left my office at 5:30 in 20 years, but whatever time people leave offices these days, that would stay open and it wouldn't cause any kind of traffic issues. And the chirping would allow any pedestrians to coming along to know that the door is opening.
Excuse me, Rich, quick thing on that door. Is that gonna be like an expedited open door or no? Like you see like these car dealerships, it rolls up super
No.
fast, it won't be that. So they'll have to wait in the street
I would-
until that door
I
opens?
would doubt it. I don't know the functionality of it, and maybe it's really more of a question for the architect and
Right.
or the owner. I know they tend to be fairly lightweight and sort of those ones in the car dealerships.
Right.
And they're sort of more transparent. So I don't know with the door and the aesthetic whether that could be managed here, but certainly it may not be as fast as those vacuum doors, but it could be a decent door that provides that to go. But, you know, that would be, you certainly could be key fob accentuate as the door goes up. Once people are inside, obviously they can wait while the queue to get out. But we think it's a better aesthetic to have that covered. We're concerned about safety, so we can certainly allow it to stay open for longer periods during the rush hour. But certainly, once it goes to night, we'd rather have that, the ability to close that off, not rely solely on cameras and monitoring, things like that.
While you're on parking, are you gonna talk about the two-family?
I am. Well, when it comes to I'm gonna talk about the parking variance, but I did go over, the parking before, since there are, apparently we've noticed there's been a couple of cars parked there, and it's hard to tell because we see a lot of cars are parked over at the Charlie Brown's, and that's been vacant for a while, so we're not sure if they're interlopers, but, on the original approval, the existing tenants, did not have, any cars, so they were not required to buy a permit. One of the apartments is currently empty, so there's one tenant and one vacant. We allotted, they will not, if that is one of the tenants who's parking in that slot, they will no longer be allowed to do so, and obviously they'll be required to buy permits under our current ordinance. And so that's the proposal. 3 parking spaces are generated for the 2 users. It certainly would be easy to control that as leases in the past. They've either had none or one, and certainly, since it's one of the nice things about having the 2 buildings under control by the same owner, is that they can control those leases and control the interoperation and the compatibility of the 2 uses over time. So it's not as though we have 2 different uses under different ownership competing with each other. They're under common ownership by the controlling interest.
I guess in terms of the parking, during your testimony, you said 50 are required, 19 are provided, and that, you know, there was a possibility of obviating the need for that variance by purchasing parking permits.
Correct.
So I guess my question to you is, you have 19 spaces, 50 are required. I presume you're not talking about buying 31 parking spaces on an annual basis.
The applicant has indicated that they would purchase 31 to get rid of the parking variance. Obviously, if we get end users who have significantly less use, that the applicant would have the opportunity to come back before the board and request a modification to that approval. And so if we get a single-use tenant, and by the way, there's been, there was early discussion with the tenant 10 years ago about a shared workspace up at the corner before they did common lot. We've not discussed any kind of shared workspace. We're anticipating this is going to be a lease situation. It's actually very difficult to get financing for WeWork type operations because you don't have long-term leases to show the bank. So while that may be an option in the past, if that's a permitted use, it may come to fruition. But right now we're looking for the versatility. The old building, because of its constriction point, was really limited to a single user, single tenant. And by expanding into the old garage restaurant, not only does it give us the ability to improve the aesthetics of the garage, but it allows them flexibility to create this into 1, 2, 3, 4 tenant spaces up top. So by allowing for multiple access points on the diagonal corners, it gave much more flexibility to the end user. And clearly, if we come with an end user who has a much lower parking demand, we're going to come back to this board and ask for an amendment to reduce the number of parking spaces parking permits that are required.
But those 31 parking permits, 3 of them would actually relate to
Correct.
the residential property.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And similarly, if we have long-term leases that show that those only have 1 parking space, we might exercise that option too. But that would obviously be for a later date.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
I have a question. I have a question about the streetscape.
Mm-hmm.
The town has spent a lot of money creating a certain aesthetic for streetscapes on Main Street and Millburn Avenue. And this seems to just be so totally different from that aesthetic that it bothers me. This looks like a cross street in New York City. How can you incorporate excuse me, incorporate the work that has been done to create the aesthetic on the street? It's right within a few feet of the building, and pull that into this application.
Well, it's a good question, and we have thought about it, and there's been a reluctance to embrace. We know that some of the downtown, before the new complete street, some of the downtown had that brick patterning on the outer 2 feet. That seems to be going away. It was a maintenance issue.
Well, that's not there anymore.
Right, and so it's in parts of the town. There's a new aesthetic. We don't know what that is, and this is actually this is, we believe that at some point complete streets will extend down. Complete streets may be 10 years off, for we know. So we haven't given.
I'm talking about complete streets.
Well,
I'm talking about the benches, the softening of the street, where pedestrians are walking with large planters and
Yep.
flowers and trees and the lights.
Yep.
And all of that. This looks very industrial and very out of step with all of that that has been done.
And we've talked, I've talked to the business administrator as little as 2 weeks ago on the specific project, saying, do we have a town standard that we can apply? If you have a town standard, we're happy to provide so many street trees, planters, benches, whatever. There's been a lot of pushback on the aesthetic of the benches, on the aesthetic of the lighting, on the aesthetic of the planters. And so, we've been saying to the township, we're happy to work with the sidewalk and extend any new design criteria forward, but we don't know what that is. And the business administrator couldn't tell us what that is. We're happy to work with Tom Doty, whether it's providing cutouts and doing trees or doing the planters that are up in there. We're perfectly willing to work with whatever aesthetic we're told. We just hate to go and put something in that's completely different than the rest of the downtown aesthetic to find out who,
This is
meetings where,
completely different than the rest of the downtown stuff.
we're stuck in the middle of not, we're happy to do something. We just need some direction in what, so we don't feel like we're putting money that's gonna be torn out in 6 months or a year. And we're happy to work with Tom Doty. Tom Doty has a whole lot of trees that he's happy to put into 4-foot openings if the town wants to go in that direction. So, Mayor, we'd like to work with you. I just don't know, we don't know what standard to follow. And so the architect has tried to embellish it through, some plantings and lighting. As to the street, we know we're covering up 4 different curb cuts. We're not getting rid of the curb cut, to Mr. Heller's question. We're not getting rid of the curb cut that's in front of the outdoor dining area, garden space at the common lot, because that's not under common ownership with this applicant. So we're not getting rid of that one. Certainly, I suspect that it'll be part of the town's future plans, but we don't know what that word future means. If the town could give us a standard, we're happy to provide. My clients would be happy to install whatever the town wants. We just need some direction.
I have a question about the width of the sidewalk. In terms of the entire street, and I can see in the ghosted in 2-family house that appears, and I can also see that on the ground floor plan, appears to be further back. Do the other houses on that side, not the other house, the other buildings and houses, I guess, on that side of Essex Street, do they come right to the property line, or are they set back?
You've got, on our survey here, you can see, or on the site plan, you can see that the 2-family is set back from the right of way. It's set back from the right of way. I'm sorry, it's 10. It's set back approximately 5.5 feet, which means the total depth from that house to the curb line is approximately 15 feet. The area where our building is, it's about 10.5 feet to the face of curb. If you go and you look further, you see the next building up has about a 2-foot setback, so it's close. And if you look, the next building on the one corner, because it starts at the curb, that's also essentially on the property line. As you move in, the next ones, the corners are essentially close to the property line. And as we go back to the Capri restaurant, it goes back to basically about a 1-foot setback from the street line. So, again, similar with common lot, that building is on the corner. So it's not uncommon in this area where the buildings do run up to the allowed 0 setback limit. The outlier is actually, the one that's really different is the 2-family house.
And on Main Street, is that the case? Is the sidewalk? I'm just trying to get a sense of scale.
Yeah, most of Main Street, we did the Riverwalk development, and those buildings coming up on the northeasterly side of Main Street, adjacent to parking lot 1, those are right on, in some cases over the line. The Charlie Brown's is right on the line, follows the line. Most of the buildings, on both sides of Main Street are 0 setback. So that kind of recaps some of the engineering and technical issues. To go into the planning, I would point out that when this board heard the garage restaurant, that was a permitted conditional use. The reason they came to this board as opposed to the planning board is because there were 2 uses on the site at that time. There was a 2-family house, and there was the garage restaurant, what would become the garage restaurant building. So we're not here because there's a 2-family house and that's not a permitted zone. If anything, that use, which predates the ordinance, back from when much of Essex Street was 1- and 2-family dwellings on this side, that particular use, I would say, is an existing non-conforming use, and I think that was sort of corroborated in the 2008 approval when they included it as a permitted use in the dual use on the property along with the garage restaurant. So I think it confirms that it's an existing non-conforming use, or it conferred that status that it's not an illegal use. And it's been well cared for and had significant investments put in over the time. So it's actually one of the nicer, both of those are among the nicer apartments in the downtown. But we need a D1 variance because we have more than one use on the site. To establish the special reasons that meet the positive criteria, the applicant must show that the project in total carries out purposes of zoning as defined in the municipal land use law. And the purposes are defined under 4055 D2. And again, we're looking at both uses. We think that purposes under the Act are advanced. The first is public health and general welfare. The site is particularly suited to the use of an office building that dovetails and works nicely, keeps a nice distance away, and works its way around the existing 2-family dwelling. Also, common ownership and control of both the residential and commercial uses on the site does allow the applicant to ensure that the uses remain compatible with other and surrounding uses in the neighborhood, and that was also found by the planning board by the Board of Adjustment back in 2008. Under 4055-2G, this provides an appropriate location for commercial use to meet the needs of the community. This provides prime office space in our downtown, which in turn feeds retail services, and food establishments. It provides for the continuation of a very high-end residential use, which also benefits the same downtown uses, but tends to actually benefit them more at the evenings. This is an area where residential uses are not uncommon in this portion of Essex Street, and where and it's a location where permitted retail and restaurants have not flourished. It also promotes a desirable visual environment. The 2-family dwelling has had significant aesthetic upgrades, and this eliminates that 1,447 square foot vacant space. That's the old garage restaurant, which is, I would say, out of character with the neighborhood in both its appearance and its signage. I'll get to the negative criteria for all the variances at the end. With regard to parking, we believe if the applicant purchases permits for the calculated parking deficiency, no variance is required. I would point out that the net increase in the parking deficiency with this application did go from 24 to 31 spaces, but as I indicated earlier, we're actually providing more parking per square foot than in the previous application. I would also point out the garage approval was an approval for variance for 27 cars. The old application that we had a 24, the one was approved by the planning board for the smaller office building, had a deficiency of 24. So between the garage restaurant and the previously approved office building, we had a net deficiency of 51 parking spaces in this area. With the new application, the restaurant is gone, which means the total deficiency is now 31 spaces. So we've reduced that deficiency or that impact on the town parking by 20 spaces, which again, that's really be absorbed by permits, but it means 20 less net permits that would have to be required if we came back, if the garage had a permit requirement and our old building had one. So we think it's a net decrease on the impact of parking. And again, since the applicant is willing to purchase parking permits, that variance goes away. With regard to height, that can be approved under C1, and that applies where an extraordinary or exceptional situation creates a hardship on further developing the property without the need for variance relief. That floodplain does mean that we can't develop this property in the way you would normally develop a property. We need that extra height to get this building to work, and the fact we've all struggled in any of the variances that I've worked on in the downtown for height, we've all struggled to keep it at that 10% or less than 10%, and it's managed to work. I would point out that the as shown on the architect's A3, that's the same exact amount of height variance relief that was requested and approved for the Commonwealth building. It was the same amount. It was also the same amount of height that was approved on the previous elevated retail with apartments. That was the Driscoll application on lot 15 back in 2008. And it's the same degree or the same extent of parking variance that was approved on the Saigon restaurant as they're looking to expand, because their expansion space needs to be above the floodplain. So again, once you pick up and try to get space that meets the DP requirement, it naturally pushes the height of the building up, and we've strained to really keep it down to that 10%. In fact, because the building got deeper and lassoed this in, that's the reason we had to get rid of that mezzanine. We can no longer fit that mezzanine because we had some higher elevations on the building, they were counted into your average, and so statistically, we could no longer fit a mezzanine in that level. So, and we kept the same height above average grade. We think that the loading can be approved as a C2, where the variance presents a better planning alternative. A dedicated loading space is not required for the proposed use. Adding a loading space would create another curb cut, which is contrary to the pedestrian nature of the business downtown district and the intent of the master plan. For all these variances, we need to demonstrate that we meet the negative criteria, and that's the two-pronged criteria, that there's no substantial detriment to the public good, and there's no substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the master plan and zoning plan. With regard to public detriment, we see no negative aspects. With regard to the dual use, in 2008, the board found that that the common ownership and control of both residential and commercial uses on the site allows the applicant to ensure that the uses remain compatible with other uses in the surrounding neighborhood. And we think that circumstance continues to be appropriate. With regard to the height, because the minimal height deviation of 2 foot 8 inches, it will be difficult to actually notice the deviation, and it certainly will not be out of context in the neighborhood, especially since a number of the other buildings have received the same height deviation variance. And again, that's really due to the floodplain issues. There is no negative impact of that additional height in terms of casting shade or shadow on the adjoining buildings. With regard to the loading, as I indicated, most deliveries come by FedEx, UPS, or Amazon, and they will typically park at the curb while making other deliveries in the area, and they tend to be fairly short. And the deliveries will certainly be much less impactful than those that would be associated with a restaurant use that we're eliminating. Overall mitigation of any other additional potential negative impacts, we think this will vastly improve the streetscape. We do want to work with the town, and we are happy to work with the town on improving curb details. We don't own that area, but we're happy to work. We just need some direction. It allows for the elimination of 4 curb cuts, which interfere with the potential for metered parking, and which the township can certainly respond and restripe that as they see appropriate. As indicated, the applicant is willing to commit to the purchase of employee parking permits to match parking deficiency, which eliminates the need for variance relief. And I would point out, again, that most all uses and properties within the B4 district do require parking variances. One of the conditions of the planning board application was that we do provide an audible alarm on the outside of the building, which would activate when the garage doors open. And we have reviewed the reports from your professionals, and we agree to meet all of the requirements of the engineers, as well as building, fire, and police. We think that with regard to the master plan, we think that the master plan seeks to encourage pedestrian-friendly development, which reinforces the street line. The master plan, we think, we think that the master plan seeks to protect and preserve the community as a residential community of the highest order, and spur commercial development, appropriate commercial development in the downtown. We think that these combined uses will continue to do that with the variances included. We think that it is a rare opportunity to get a new building in the downtown, which tends to, we often say a rising tide lifts all boats. When you see that kind of investment in the community, it's only a positive thing. And it's a rare opportunity to get a long-time derelict property developed with high-quality, attractive building that will help to energize a part of the downtown that has always been underdeveloped with very old and eclectic buildings. We think it's a great opportunity. We think it's a better application than the planning board previously approved. And I certainly would be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Keller, I don't think you answered Mr. Heller's question about the curb cut at the driveway apron. Is it 21 feet? I thought that you had that question.
The curb cut is shown as 20.5 feet.
Okay.
And that's common, so as you're turning out, you don't drop off the curb.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
I think some of it can be suspended above in elevation in these areas, but I think most of it goes on the roof. I think the architect can answer that. The elevator mechanical issue also is contained in the plan on top of the roof. But I would have to defer to the architect to discuss locations of any additional mechanical equipment. I know, as indicated, there is existing mechanical equipment that's hidden on top of the garage restaurant building, but I defer to the architect for the location of any additional mechanicals.
We'll hold your answer until we finish with Mr. Keller. Any other questions from board members? I have just one. Has a decision been made as to the nature of the garage door?
What do you mean by the nature?
Meaning what materials are being used on the garage door?
I would, black. No, I would defer to the architect. I don't know the exact material.
So when someone pulls up to this building and they're waiting for the door to open, where are they gonna sit? Because if they sit across the apron, that's a bit of a problem for pedestrians.
Yeah. Well, we think that once that door, and it could just be on a timer where it opens up at 8:30 when, somebody could have a key fob, which are coming up from 50 feet away, you can press the button, it starts to go up. Clearly, the intent is not that someone's going to, block the curb. We're getting rid of, we've got some areas where you can pull up and dovetail the parking and we can get in. But I think the best thing would be to work with timing when the primary rush of people, and there could be a rush, when they get there, that garage door would be opened, allow for free access in and out. And then, as I said, when most of the people are at their desks at 9:30 or so, it would just go on to the usual 15-minute. So certainly we could work with the timing on that to make it safe.
Is it possible to make a yellow curb out front of it? So that it's not public parking where people, if they were staging to pull in or something like that?
It's not our, so it's sort of we've got one parking space, and we're creating the ability to get other parking spaces, and if we could certainly put a parking space in front of the garage restaurant area. So that's really up to the town. We'd be happy to do that. We can't stripe a curb yellow, but we'd be happy to meet with police and engineering to see if that would be possible.
Any other questions? Anyone in the audience have any questions of Mr. Keller on the planning testimony?
Terry Heller, 343 Millburn Avenue, the courtyard. Rich, the apron at that width, again, complete streets, incomplete streets, whatever we want to call it, there seems to be a standard or an incorrect standard in Lot 5 for the driveway there, which is very heavily used. Do you know what the width of that apron is as compared to, again, what I'm going toward on this? Does it need to be this wide for pedestrian safety? Two-part.
I think that's not, except for an 18-foot wide driveway, I don't think, for two-way travel, I don't think that's excessive. I think opening it to 21 and a half, it's as minimal as possible. You're right, you run the The narrower you make it, the more you slow cars down, which is good when you're crossing pedestrian areas, but as we've seen with complete streets, a lot of these radii were made too small, so that it becomes difficult to navigate without running over the curb. We thought the 20.5 is an appropriate amount for an 18. I don't think we need to go, I wouldn't certainly go any lower, and I don't think we need to go any higher.
What would be the sight lines if the town were so inclined to put parking spaces back in where the driveways are being closed? How far away from the driveway, both east and west?
Well, I actually start to, well, we've got sight triangles shown, so from the center of the doors, to stay completely out of the sight triangle, you have to have 85 feet to 90 feet for the first car. So if that's, and again, when the town looks at restriping, they look at things like driveway locations and they'll decide where to put that spot. It may dovetail, not give you the answer you'd like in getting more parking spaces, but it may dovetail well with Mr. Plattner's request about creating an area where cars could stage out of the way, because to stay out of that sight triangle, you do need to be about 90 feet up, which is about from the center of the garage door.
Is it, in theory, the parking spaces that the town has added back in as it turns the corner to Essex Street? I believe there's 2 new parking spaces that are there. Are those at risk as a result of having this new curb cut?
No, they're out of it. They're out of it.
So this would be a question for Martha.
Question for engineering. And look, you know, we tried, and we have generally accepted site triangles, and we certainly try to maintain them wherever possible. And when we put trees in, we put high branch trees with relatively narrow trunks. But it's often in cases where you have less than the required site distance, such as when you're pulling out of the parking lot 12, I think, which is the Millburn Deli lot, whichever number that is. So there are times when that can encroach on that, and it has to do with speed and visibility, and the fact that you've got another lane here to help turn into. So I would leave that to Martha and Christine, who's really a traffic expert.
And Ted, one thing is comparing it to the deli lot, which is a very active driveway. As you've testified, this is not going to be very active, so it's potentially that we might get some other parking spaces, which are now, people are parking on the street there, as I think we all know, because the driveways are sort of leading to nowhere, so it's possible.
Yeah, Christine Bugle, the assistant engineer, has been tasked with going through various areas in the town, and she's now participating in the Parks Ad Hoc Committee in looking at creating other spots in this, you know, outside of any complete streets activity. So certainly, I don't think that our location of this driveway is going to adversely impact the ability to park in that area.
No,
And Christine Bugle would be the person, for the township, would be the appropriate person to make that decision.
And who would look to see at Common Lot, I think that driveway is part of that application, I know it's not your application, but who in the town to see if as part of curbing this, which again is a county road, if that driveway, which is not also being used, who in the town, would that be Martha, would that be Board of Adjustment, Planning Board Secretary, would that be attorney, who should look at that?
Obviously, this board has no jurisdiction over
Agreed.
that, and its
Right.
approved application
Agreed.
wasn't done at the time, so it's really up to the township to make that determination. When the common lot came in, that was indicated that that would not be used. I'm fairly certain, I didn't look back at the resolution, I don't think I worked on that one. If we did, it might have been my partner, but, no, we didn't work on it, actually. And so, we look over the resolution, and then certainly, that's, once it gets beyond the board's purview, it's really up to the township to make that decision as to whether they want to put a full-face curb in there and get rid of that. But the town has actually, in other places, it's not always the neatest thing, but they have actually taken other non-functional depressed curbs and put parking in front of them. So it doesn't mean to say that with the depressed curb, they can't put a spot there. We prefer them to put a full-face curb there and make it more attractive, but.
A couple other short ones, just tying back into Mary's question. While there's certainly not a standard for complete street, the corners at all 4 Millburn Avenue and Main Street corners and the Essex Street and Main Street corners have been addressed, bumped out, landscape, trees. If it's not a cost to you or your client at some later date, if it is possible to put trees and or other similar details in, if at some later date, whether it's complete streets or some other development that accompanies the Department of Public Works, what's the downside of putting the trees in if Tom Doty has them, if you leave the tree wells in,
Well, it really
What's the
becomes,
downside?
I can't, well, you mentioned curb bump outs, I can't do that,
No,
obviously, it's a county road.
Of course.
With regard to any other, and those fruit trees, those would stay under Tom Doty's jurisdiction, and they would be under the ownership of the town. So, as I said, I don't think we have any problem meeting with Tom Doty. I don't know that you can just say, let's extrapolate what's done up at the corner and bring it down here, because it's a very unique corner condition. So, again, I don't know who to turn to provide guidance on what that would be. If you said, would we agree to put some planters out in the front that match the vernacular of what else was there, I'd be happy to do that, but I don't know what that.
Mr. Chairman, is it under your board's authority to, as part of this application, I know it's a county road among other things, to either do or not require?
I don't think so, but I'll leave that up to.
Yeah, I mean, did this even go to Tom Doty?
No, yeah.
Yes, Tom had no comment.
Okay, because just, I was looking through here, I don't have any professional reports on this application. Did you email them to us? Okay, I'll have to look for it. So Mr. Doty issued a report and had no comment on this application.
Okay. Sidewalks, just talking about last details of complete streets, which are a saw-cut, cracked sidewalk up and down Millburn Avenue. Is there the possibility that we could get at least a trowel joint, or among other staggered, either 2 foot by 4 foot, something else that maybe will establish a pattern or a detail that certainly would be of no additional cost to the applicant, but certainly could be more attractive?
Well, so you're asking us to define a new standard for the downtown?
No, there is no standard. There's 100 different sidewalks throughout the town. So what is the sidewalk that you're proposing?
You don't want the saw cut 2 by 2 pattern.
I'm asking, what is the detail?
I don't know what we've come up with. Well, it's probably a standard expansion joint with a trowel corner, because we don't know what else to do. So it might be, it could be a 2 by 4. Generally, they're done in 4 foot, 8 foot expansion and 4 foot control joints. Generally the detail is to be troweled. We have not. I don't think we have a detail for the.
Was the entrance door and garage door recessed?
Yes.
So is the anticipation that you're just going to leave regular concrete?
Are you saying you prefer to see a ban of something else?
I think in either location, certainly the property owner has the opportunity to choose.
That's not a level of detail which we've gone through yet. I have a standard concrete detail providing 1/2-inch joints at specified locations. So certainly.
I'll leave with this, just a suggestion of the bow site, the same material that has been utilized throughout much of the downtown, just as an alternate detail to portions that are not concrete.
Which portion?
The front of portions of my building on Main Street, there's the gray block. I think it's a bow site material, but just a consideration.
We would have no problem with providing some details of a different material in the entry vestibule and in front of the walk, and we'll certainly consider what's done in your building. I don't know that I can make a promise at this point, not knowing what it is, but look, my client is looking at spending a lot of money creating a really attractive building.
And as you pointed out, there is nothing new, that you have the opportunity to make something very special, because we haven't had anything new in such a long time, whether it's the garage door, the landscaping, any of the lighting, the windows, whether it's the corniche or just the molding at the top. You have a great opportunity to do something really good. Thank you. Won't keep you anymore.
Thank you.
One last question. Will it require to put any type of notification on that doorway that's an active driveway?
It's a good question. There is usually some indication that's an active driveway and not to park in front of it. I don't know if it's required by code. I know that we had indicated that when the door is active, it would chirp so people would be aware that the door is going up and down. I don't know the legal requirements. I would probably have to defer to the architect as to whether that's a requirement, because it's really attached to the building, it's outside my building.
Any other questions for this witness? I think the architect had one question that was posed to her about the rooftop equipment.
Yes, and I forgot to speak to that. You do have a drawing PB3, it was underneath one of our drawings, so So there is a rooftop plan that was in your package, which is drawing PB3, which shows the proposed rooftop equipment, which is set almost back at where the garage restaurant building is. So the plan is to have 2 rooftop units sort of set very far back on the building.
Mr. Heller, does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions for this witness? All right, now this is the time in the hearing when I'm going to ask if there is anyone in the audience who would like to make a statement with respect to this application. I hear none, I see none. I'll close the public portion of the meeting. All right, board members, what are your thoughts?
Well, my initial thought, having taken a look at the, at the renderings and the drawings, that it's just my concern is that it's gonna look like a, look like a warehouse. And it's something, you want to have something, while there may not be a set standard for the whole town, you want to have something which has some sort of a charm to it, something which is adding to the appeal. And I guess it's hard just looking at the drawings to see how it's really going to turn out, and that's difficult to to really foresee. But that's my primary concern at this point.
Thank you. That was really your point, wasn't it, Mary?
Yes, and I must say, I have a lot invested in time and energy in the downtown, as some of you know, from the mid-1990s. I conducted strategic planning sessions, 2 of them, and all of the whiteboard studies that we did were consistently a small town, downtown feel, like Westfield and Summit, and Red Bank, Princeton. Walkable community. I see families crowding into the downtown now. They're sitting there on the benches. Kids are down there after school. This reminds me, as I said, of Cross Street in New York City. It changes the whole feel of Essex Street to industrial. And I think we have, I know that we have a duty to the streetscape, as it's been said many times on application after application. So I have a real problem with the way that it sits on Essex Street. Also, during that 25 to 30-year period I worked in downtown, we heard consistently from professionals that you want to have consistent walkable area. Our downtown is not all that big, so we wanted to put those things on Essex Street as well as on Millburn Avenue. That's my story.
Any other comments?
I don't disagree with either of those comments. I do like the idea of something going up there to mask right now, what you're viewing through that area, but I don't disagree that, what's being proposed right now might not, aesthetically, be the most pleasing for the streetscape and for the whole downtown plan. I know there's been some discussion of the actual operable garage doors. I'm not sure that I still understand the purpose of like why we're, why they're, really being kept. When it was a restaurant, when it was the garage, there was a reason for it. It was a garage that kind of went with the theme of that restaurant, but now that we're turning it into, more of an office building, it doesn't fully make sense to me, so.
I have a few comments. One, when I first saw it, it's unfortunate that it can't be retail, but I understand that it can't. I think that's inherently that's not the architect's fault, that's not the project's fault, that's just the way it is. So that's hurting the facade, I think, tremendously, that it's so solid. I think it's, the idea, the height is not different than the others, and I think it would be okay, it's just that it's so much wider than common lot, so there's a lot more of it that's that height. My biggest concern is actually the, entry to the garage, like where it is, Millburn Deli, I know it doesn't have the traffic or won't have the traffic of Millburn Deli, but that's like a very, I think, a really dangerous situation. I'm just concerned, like, people crossing and how the garage door would actually work, like would there be a gate where people have a card to get in? Would that make more of a backup if like the machine isn't working? And I'm just having trouble visualizing it. I guess I should have maybe asked this earlier. Was it possible to enter the garage off of the alley that goes to the existing garage restaurant, like from the side? So if there was backup, it would be off of that. I guess I think it's unfortunate there can't be retail. I think that's really kind of a problem. That's, you know, it's kind of a given condition. That's, I think, kind of a more, it's a funny condition. Like, and I almost wish it wasn't, you know, definitely wish it wasn't there.
So I echo some of the same concerns. I think that's been clear with my line of questioning. This definitely looks like something you can see more down in the village or the meatpacking district type of building, not in downtown Millburn. But forgetting the aesthetic for a minute, that garage door is really concerning to me because if you ever come past that area at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the middle school gets out, it is absolutely packed with kids
Crazy.
not paying the most attention to almost anything other than their phone. And when that door comes up and you have a group of kids walking across that area to cut to La Strada, as they often do, you know, and someone's coming out and they're not paying attention, you know, because they're coming across an active sidewalk, it's very concerning to me. And it's very blind when you come out. Your nose is going to be well out of that building before you see anyone coming down the sidewalk, because I often would think someone's going to be startled when someone pulls out of there. So those are kind of my concerns. And also, of course, the queuing up to get into the building. I still can't figure out if you have cars parked on the sidewalk in a proper parking spot and someone comes up to the building, they're now going to be double parked out in the street to get into this building, or in most cases, I'm sure people are going to pull onto the apron and wait for the thing to go up, which now you have pedestrians that are waiting for this car to pull in the building. So that's my biggest concern in the practical sense of the usage of that garage door, as opposed to the hypothetical sense of how it actually might be used.
Can I make a couple of comments?
Sure.
I just want to remind the board that Lot 15 already has an approval from the planning board to build a building on it. And I am not sure how the approved plans and the aesthetics of that building approved by the planning board compare to the building that you're looking at here. I see in the planning board resolution of approval, which is part of your package, that the plans were prepared by Studio 1200. They have different dates. And yet I see the package of our plans prepared by Studio 1200. They indicate they're planning board submittals with a March 2019 date on them. Now, I don't know if that was just a mistake and it should say Board of Adjustment submittal with March 2019 dates, you know, as opposed to planning board, because that's a little confusing to me. But I just want to remind you that you may have a problem with the aesthetics of the appearance of the structure, but they have an approval to put a structure up there right now. So you might want some clarification from the experts on that. I understand all of your concerns about the garage door. I didn't raise the issue. You all seem to be focusing on the access to that garage going in. And in my mind, the greater safety issue is the egress of vehicles because when there could be pedestrians there. It's interesting because on a recent vacation, I happened to see something that I'd never ever seen before, and they were pedestrian detection photo sensor to bollards. And so movement is what activates these things. Now, where I was. It was sensor bollards in a crosswalk. So as you stood in front of them, the stop sign for traffic started flashing. But I came back and I actually was curious enough about it that I went on the internet and I was looking into these, and they actually had one in a very similar setup where when pedestrians are walking past this garage door, the light that's flashing is actually inside the garage, letting an exiting vehicle know that there are pedestrians out there on the sidewalk. I just thought it was something interesting, and it sounds like it's at least one method that could potentially address any safety concern when vehicles are egressing, when there could be a high volume of pedestrians walking across the sidewalk.
I'm glad that you raised that issue. I am very torn on this application because I'm looking at the actual resolution of the planning board, and to some extent it mirrors what we're being asked to do. We have a height variance application before us. We have
And a loading space variance.
and a loading dock, and I don't have a problem with either of those. And the point was made that this building looks like an industrial building, and it does. On the other hand, we know from experience, and the planning board had an application the other day from Mr. Schultz, the furrier, who came before the board seeking to take that three-story building he has on Millburn Avenue and convert 2 floors of retail above the ground floor to residential. And as a longtime retailer in town, he made the point in his personal presentation that retail is basically on its last legs in these downtown areas. I'm not talking about restaurants and food dispensing places, I'm talking about retail. So we're kind of caught here between a rock and a hard place, I think. We certainly don't want to see that property the way it is and the way it's been for umpteen years. On the other hand, if we approve this application, we're in a very tough spot when we get to the question of aesthetics, because aesthetics are really not a land use issue. And either we approve these 2 lots being put together and the other applications that have been made, or we don't. And if we don't, what are we stuck with? Besides the possibility of an appeal, obviously. But assuming there's no appeal, what are we stuck with? We're stuck with what we have there now. And the testimony tonight was, at least the statement was made, I think, by the applicant's attorney, that the development of this site, as approved by the planning board, is not fiscally possible. If that is indeed so, then at least that's what I heard.
I don't recall hearing that testimony. I thought he said they stopped working on the construction under the approved plan, thinking that they could combine the 2 lots and that would be
And I think the
more appropriate.
yeah, but I think, and he can speak for himself, I think the reason that he gave was that economically, the development of the property as it is presently configured is not feasible, but you can speak.
No, it would,
You can
Mr.
speak for
Fraser is
yourself.
correct. It was better to have the two properties together to make a bigger project, but certainly separate, it can be completed, the original approval. Just, it makes more economic sense putting two together. But one doesn't fall on the other. It can be done.
Could we ask the architect to, I wasn't part of the board when you approved this a year ago or whatever.
No, the
That was
planning
the
board
planning
approved
board.
it. This board did not
Not
approve
the
it.
same, yeah.
We need to reopen the public
Yeah,
session.
you need to reopen the
Yes.
hearing.
And I just want to address
Well,
your,
excuse me,
So moved.
is there a motion to reopen the public session? It's been moved. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
just want to address the comment you made about the plans. It should be zoning board, not planning.
I had a
board.
feeling.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
The plans that are, identify them as planning board
Oh, but
submittal,
planning
it
board
should be
submittal.
zoning board.
Zoning board. Okay, anyone else in the public now wish to comment? And I'll close it. Step forward.
Yeah,
You need to be sworn now. if
Yeah,
you're
no
gonna
problem.
make your say.
yeah, yes, Lance Kaplan. LANCEKAPLAN,
KAPLAN,
LAN, 41 Woodfield Drive, Short Hills.
41 what?
Woodfield Drive.
Okay.
And just to answer the question, the current approval.
Wait, so you are a principal of the
I'm a
applicant?
principal of the applicant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you the managing member? It's
I'm
an
managing
LLC.
member of Red Ochre Investments. Just
Okay.
to answer Mr. Steinberg's question, the current approval, which is in place, is economically viable independently of this particular project.
Is or is not?
Is.
Is.
And could go forward. The theory around co-joining the two lots was that it just makes better sense because we knew the lots, there was a better use of the back piece of the garage. But it is possible and feasible economically to take the current plans forward.
Thank you.
I just want to call Ms. Dougherty again to explain the prior plans that were submitted
Sure.
at the planning board application. Ms. Dougherty?
So it might be helpful if I sort of go back to when the application was submitted to the planning board, the original sort of impetus for the design and the research of the history was that, you know, this part of town and right behind where, behind Essex Street is where some of the old mill buildings were. And I think, as people know, my business is here, I'm very invested in this town. I live in Maplewood, I live in an old house and all of those things. So I think that and you know, maybe I didn't use the right choice of words in describing it originally. The design intent was always to find an appropriate building for downtown Millburn. I think when we look at some of the most successful buildings in downtown Millburn, the original building that's on the corner of Main Street and Millburn Avenue, the three-story building, which I apologize, I don't know the original name of that building, but some of the original downtown buildings in Millburn are certainly brick buildings, and they are, you know, of a certain character. So I know while there's, you definitely don't want to lose your downtown character in Millburn, and I think from the perspective of the team, that this was an opportunity to actually enhance the downtown and the small town feel of it. And you know, maybe the rendering was a little bit distorted in how it was presenting that to you, but I know that it's very similar, almost identical to the materials and the detailing of what was approved by the planning board. And so we were all very conscious as a team to stick with the materials, the character, the planters in the front, the brick detailing, the cornice. I know there was a question asked about the cornice detailing, the fact that it was all brick. And our team and the design team spent a lot of time looking at sort of downtown buildings. And while I think there is a relationship to, you know, as you said, a New York downtown building, the scale is very different. You know, we're at the 30.67 feet, which is a completely different scale than what you would see sort of in a city environment. And so there, and if you look at downtown buildings, I mean, you know, we went through a process of looking at sort of hundreds of images of downtown buildings in all of the surrounding towns. Now, some of the original buildings have been painted over time. You know, when you look at some of the downtown buildings, they were originally brick, some have been painted, some have been painted lighter colors, so they have a different aesthetic to them. But again, I would put forth that the detailing was very consciously focused on some of the buildings in town and some of the historical buildings, and then certainly in this town and surrounding towns. So I don't know if that helps, but that was, and I apologize because I really didn't go through that history. That was the history that was presented when it went to the planning board, and as I said, the detailing for this building matches almost identically what we presented to the planning board in terms of the scale of the building and the modulation of the materials and the elements. So.
I have a question.
Sure.
So with the original application to the
Yes.
planning board,
Yep.
the operable garage door,
Ms. Doherty, why don't you put your photo, the rendering up there?
Yeah,
Would
that
that
would
be
be
helpful to
great.
you?
Sure.
Yeah,
And
thank
I do
you.
also have, I mean, I do have all of the original drawings here, you know, what went to the planning board, but
I don't,
All right,
it's
well,
okay.
put
you
up,
just
put up
it
your rendering for
Sure.
now, your color rendering.
sure.
So, if that
So,
helps you.
yeah, so in,
Well,
Sorry.
thanks.
Very nice, okay.
So are you saying that that garage door was gonna be there no matter what, whether it was combined or not? I'm a little confused about that. It would be in that exact location?
Okay, so this sort of, this is the original rendering, which was taken from the other.
the original, wait, this is the rendering that was approved at the planning board
Yes,
level?
so this would be A4.
I wanna check.
Yep.
A4, right, Eileen?
Yes.
Yes, A4.
So this was the original rendering that was approved. This is the building that was approved. So, I'll just sort of run through the elements that are pretty much identical. You know, the entrance was on the right-hand side. As I said, the stairs, the elevator, none of that changed. The only thing, we sort of softened the entry in the current version. All of the landscaping element, the garage door is the same. The front corner of the building, actually the width of the building is very similar, and the difference in the newer version is that we have an opportunity to capture some more space as we went back to the garage restaurant building. But in terms of the height, I know there was a question asked about the cornice and the brick detailing, which you see here. It is really identical to what was already approved.
I actually see a very big difference in the amount of openness in the one on the left that has much larger windows, and to me it's very different. Like this one looks, I would think it's a warehouse. Inside it's a storage facility, where that definitely seems like there'd be people inside. That to me is a very big difference.
So as was described, in connecting to the garage restaurant building, there's a 3.5 foot difference in the height. So to get us up to, right, in the, not, my apologies, not the height, in the floor level. So from the front of this building and where you go into this garage versus where you go into the garage restaurant building, this is 3.5 feet taller because of the way the site slopes up.
It's also something that maybe it's misleading, because I asked how wide the sidewalk was, and it was answered 10 feet.
Right.
If I look at the rendering, and I know the building is about 30 feet, so you would say proportionally that would be a third of the height, and it's coming off much less, and that's, I think that's hurting your rendering, honestly. It's making the building seem so, I don't have a problem with, I think a good street wall is actually good for city, I don't have a problem with that, but this one is coming off as much higher, because in proportion to the depth of the sidewalk, it seems way higher. So I don't know if it's the rendering that's off. It's less so in the rendering on the left, but I think that's causing part of the problem, like, it looks like it would be a much higher facade because of the width, like, it's a proportional problem.
Right,
I'm I know that's not what we're here, we don't even have the right to talk about, but we are looking at it.
I think the difference in the fenestration in the two buildings is an amazing difference. The larger windows make it much more palatable to me. This looks like Craig said, something you see in the Meatpacking District, or something you see on a cross street in New York City, even though, you know, those buildings are not exactly the same height, it has the same feel.
right. Yes, so, I mean, one of the, you know, we certainly would be amenable to, looking at sort of wider windows and going to, one of the things in the original, was that we have sort of a pattern of 2, 3, 2 in terms of the rhythm on the front of the building. So I think if they're, you know, if really trying to make the windows even wider than they are right now, I think the team would be amenable to pursuing that. You know, if it's,
so I understand this, is it the facade, the look that is the concern for the board, mainly?
I heard two concerns. One,
My concern is not aesthetics, my concern is safety of that door.
I think
Okay.
safety is
Yes.
really.
safety of the garage. And I was
Garage
gonna
setback.
ask you a question. Has any thought been given, I mean, I think the testimony was that that driveway that's there now, is going to be eliminated. Was any thought ever given to having the entrance and exit to the garage on the side of the garage, not on the front? And not deleting that,
Yeah, we looked at that, but there was not, we would have to demolish the two-family, and the two-family has had significant investments in it. There's not enough room to actually get there, make the turn, and get a viable parking lot. You would actually, either you'd shrink up the building so you could no longer get a double-loaded row in the parking, you'd only get a single-loaded row of parking, so you'd lose half the parking in the building, or you'd have to demolish the two-family house, and that's really just not viable given the amount of investment that's been put into that building over time. I would point out that I think there is this building was a little taller, and we're allowed to have a lower first floor, so that's why these windows were able to get bigger. When we reached into the back building, our average grade plane changed a little bit, but also we had to tie this floor plate into the higher floor plate, so we can no longer, so the floor plate came up, this came down a little bit in the new one. But I would think that if we could explore going back to the wider windows, and maybe try to pop them up higher to the ceiling, you could get a very similar aesthetic, more open aesthetic, in the new plan to the old. The beauty of this is that, you know, this is fully approved, but it leaves the garage restaurant building as kind of an unusable appendage in the back that's in search of a use, and we don't think it's gonna find one, and we thought it was an excellent opportunity for this to grab that. So we're taking an approved plan and grabbing that, and we certainly are willing to work with some facade tweaks to open that facade up. And as I said, we're willing to work with planters and to pick up the vernacular of the downtown and highlighting that street, that curb to building streetscape. But we've got a limited distance to work in.
I'm not sure the aesthetic sacrifice for the town is worth that for the pickup of the back. I think that just has a much more aesthetically pleasing view.
Yeah, I thought so too, but I think we can get a lot of that back if we were to go with the 2-3-2 patterning. I can't change that. You know, we're one of the downsides of picking up and renovating that garage structure is I've got to work with the first floor height, ceiling heights in there, and that set a new plenum for the second floor. But I think still we thought it was an opportunity to get rid of a sore thumb in that 1,447 square foot former garage restaurant. And with regard to the safety, we're happy to look at electronic elements, whether it's flashing lights. They used to use mirrors. This is not a, look, Millburn is not an urban environment, and you do get kids that do wrap around. I think most of them cross at the intersection, but some certainly do come down further. But I still think that you can make this work. We've made it work in Montclair, we've made it work in South Orange, we've made it work in Maplewood, and it certainly works in more urban environments. And through technology, mirrors, flashing lights, I think you can create a safe pedestrian. Look, my clients do not want to get sued. They certainly don't want someone to get hurt, first and foremost. They certainly don't want to be liable for someone getting hurt. So we certainly can look at all available technology to make that work. But it's essentially what was already approved by the planning board.
It might be helpful to just, I'm just going back to Exhibit A3 here, just in terms of scale, so that you just get a sense of, these windows are actually lower than the second floor windows at Common Lot, so I don't know if everybody can see that from here. Just
Why don't you pass it around,
okay,
if you'll,
that's helpful to see, so you can see the windows for Common Lot are actually smaller and up higher than even the proposed windows of this updated version. So, I mean, I think part of the perspective that was shown was so that we could show you sort of all the way down into, all the way back to the garage restaurant building. So, that is sort of the broadest face of what you see on Essex Street in that perspective.
So we're looking at different elevations here. Is that elevation on the side of the new proposed building, does it still have the round window and that detail, or no?
So it actually has 4 windows, and actually larger windows, so it has bigger windows on the side. But it is all brick, it has the lights, it has accent lighting on the side of the building.
so, I could be wrong, Mr. Satiri, but it seems to me you want us to allow you the opportunity to investigate what you could do with the fenestration and explore how you can assure the board that the egress from that garage
Absolutely.
can
I'd
be
rather
done
have
in
the
a safe
board not
manner.
make a decision until we
Correct.
can, yeah, exactly.
So
I
Eileen,
think we ought to carry the matter.
yeah, what's the next date?
When's the next date that you can get these folks on it? July 15th.
July 15th.
July 15th.
July 15th.
And this will be the first matter on that night.
Okay. Thank you.
So, you want to make that announcement that we're?
Yes. All right, this matter that we've been dealing with, which is technically Fidelco ROI LLC, will be carried until the evening of July 15th at 7 p.m. in this room at the municipal building. No further notices or publication will be required unless there are new or increased variances. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next matter we will hear is Landy at 1 Nottingham Road.
just, yeah, I was walking on Sunday, I saw it.
Yeah, it's open.
But Eileen, I'm going to ask you if you would to make hard copies of the reports of the township experts and include them in one of the packets.
I don't think we have them by the time it happens.
Pardon me?
I don't have reports.
No, I'm talking about the last case.
She said she emailed them to us,
I know,
so.
but I'd like to see them in the packet.
I should have printed them out when you sent them to me, but it just didn't occur to me.
Oh, yeah. I do. Timothy Cressy, Franklin. Shall I give you the benefit of my,
Absolutely.
I don't know what
Yes,
you call it?
absolutely.
Okay. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey and in New York, and been licensed for approximately 30 years. I've appeared before this board on numerous occasions and other boards around the state and in New York and other states in the U.S., and my license is presently in good standing.
Your qualifications as an architect are accepted.
Thank you. Frank bought one Nottingham, I don't know, 6 months ago, I'm going to say. And we started to look at renovating it. And when I first started, I went to see Lynn Ranieri, who was with me last month, to see what information she had on it. And I actually spoke with Barton Ross, who's the historic consultant that works with the Historic Commission. Because it's one of the first Bernhardt Mueller homes that was constructed, and the hearsay about the house is that it was which I think is hearsay of some kind, or at least not proven, is that it was this sort of model house and this sort of real estate office for this sort of Nottingham development that occurred, Lynn would probably know better than me, but somewhere between 1923 and 1927. And the house is very interesting. I'd been through it about 30 years ago, and it was through later, I think about 10 years ago, looking at it with the owners who were in there at that time. And not a lot of work was ever done to it over the years. And Frank bought it and hired me to come in, and we started to look at everything. And I contacted back to Lynn, and I contacted to Barton and tried to get their input, and ended up with the decision that what was the smart thing to do here was, I'm going to go right to the site plan now, and I'm coming in off of Old Short Hills Road, and I hit this sort of point where the house is, and we made the decision to leave the entire front section of the house, which is the part that's visible from the street, or from, coming in off the main street, and also the part where the chimney is, the part where the living room is. There's 2 bedrooms existing upstairs, but they're a little small. We left the front door remains as is. We left all that, and then we came in the back, and everything that I sort of crosshatched to the right is second floor addition over an existing sort of 1 or maybe 1.5 story footprint. And in the back left corner here, you can see where we added a second garage to the site. The existing survey is all on my BLA 1 sheet. The existing survey is on the left, the proposed is on the right. This work really requires 2 variances. And it's the front yard setback on Washington, which is existing at 18 feet. Our proposed is at 19.5. And that's the first variance. And the second one is the front yard on Nottingham, which is existing at 19 feet, and our proposed is 19 feet. So that's a 21-foot variance. But both of these variances, well, first I'm going to do the one on Nottingham. It's to extend vertically, right? We're not extending horizontally or approaching closer to the street. And the one on the Washington side is, it gets a little better than it is because we added the second car garage, but I pushed the second car garage in a little bit from the existing garage, just so I could get a little visual separation between the two buildings. And that's what triggered really the second variance, and then of course the work that's going on above, right? Because the variance is going, I guess, in 2D and in 3D in this case. But what it really allows us to do is to keep the existing house and renovate it in such a way that we can kind of get it a little more up to date with the kind of market that we're trying to hit today. So if I look at the house orientated the same way as the site plan, Nottingham's down here, Washington's up here. This area right there is where I added the garage. And it's almost like probably what was originally, I live in a Bernhard Mueller house myself, right around the corner from all of this. And this, I think, probably was originally like a potting shed. I have something like it in the backyard of my house. But I think it was probably more of an outdoor space than an indoor space. But we've taken that space and combined it to create this second car garage. And the real reason for that is because we only have 18 feet here, and the cars are parked in the driveway. They're literally parked on the street. Then we came down, they left the existing house, except that I took the existing stairway and so I moved it out here to the perimeter. And that would allow me to create a kitchen, sort of a dining area, and step down to the existing great room. And the front door remains exactly as it is. So everything sort of forward of all of this is really as it was. When I come up now on my DLA 3 sheet, which is really the second floor, you can see my point where there's 2 bedrooms up here now. It's, I don't know if over the years if any of you had a chance to go through it, but it's a little tight, a little claustrophobic, and it's a really interesting house. It's a little claustrophobic up on the second floor, I guess for me anyway. So we pulled out the stairway, I removed the 2 bedrooms there and turned that into the master bedroom. So I could get away with the thing where the ceiling height over here is only at 5'5". I got a thing here where the ceiling height's at 2 feet high. But I left that. I left the chimney and all the elements in the front. Came back through here, added really with some modest closets, not a big closet, a small master bath. Continued down, put the stairway in, and was able to get a laundry room, a hall bath, 3 bedrooms with a Jack and Jill bath, and the 3 bedrooms are not big here. They're 11'8" by 9 foot. This one's 11 foot by 10 foot. Another one's 11 foot by 11 foot. Things are tight up here, but it's at least organized and cleaned up. So that's really how we did it. We left the whole front character of what was going on in the foreground as it was. Then I come to my elevations on my DLA 4 sheet. You can see the existing building, which I think has a ridge height of about, I think it's 23 feet. Yeah, I think the existing building height is 23. And then we came in, our new ridge is coming through at 27 feet. Remember, I'm allowed to be up to 32, so I kept it down. We went back and forth with what to do with this roof, right? The existing building is a heavy slate, which I actually have on my house too. And the thickness of it is probably about, in most cases, about 2.5 inches at the bottom and gets down to about 5/8 of an inch at the top, sort of to make the building look taller than it actually is. But we were able to take some of the old slate, put it onto this element, onto the rear, And in the middle, we were proposing a standing seam metal roof. We went back and forth with that a little tonight with, I spoke with Allison, what's it, Caulfield? Canfield is the chairman of the Historic Commission, and Barton sent it back to Barton. Barton took another look at it. We've looked at it a little bit with Lynn tonight, and we think that the metal idea is the right idea. We would like to propose a diamond patterned metal roof for that area. Barton was at one point saying to me he thought we should just use timberline, asphalt. I'm a little worried about that because I think it's going to look too cheap, like it vinyl sided the addition a little bit. So that's where we are with that. The slate that's here remains. The slate comes back here. All of the siding materials all match into the existing. The front entrance all remains as is, and we keep the building. There's even a like a conical turret, if you saw the house at all. We've taken that conical turret and relocated it above this window back here in the dormer. So we pulled the elements, you can see it there also. We pulled the element that was right in here approximately in the building and relocated it back to there. We've kept the little swoop that the house has at the bottom. We tried to retain, compared to the back on my DOA 5 sheet, we've kind of kept the house but lifted it a little bit. The existing dormer, the existing garage door, we put in the new garage door matching to the existing, and then brought it into that gable, then dormered that to create the bedroom so that we could visually keep the scale of the building down. All with that slate roof that we're coming back to with this sort of diamond patterned metal, or I guess it could be a timberline roof.
Why not keep the slate that was there? Too tough to sort?
No, I know I could get the slate, because I did it on my house.
Right.
It's more of a question that, I don't know, Lynn may be better to address than me. Because I kind of just wanted to do it in slate.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that large a flat slate roof is going to look odd. I think mixing it up with a proper looking material, but having the slate on both ends will keep it. The house has so many interesting little things going on. I mean, there are windows in the house that are this big that do nothing, right? Just so I thought the idea of bringing in another material that would be in kind with, wow, that's an interesting house, kind of made sense, right? And I think turning it into something that doesn't look right wouldn't be right.
It would show a lot of slate on what's really a kind of a small house. So that's what,
I mean, look at Fred Stacy's house, and that has a very steep.
you're right, yeah.
Which is a beautiful
The one-
design element,
Yeah.
and I think if the whole front of the house were like that, that's a really cool look. I don't know
And there
that
we
this
matched
is
the
that.
slate.
Yeah,
We matched the slate. That was one that came before the board,
right.
if you remember. Well, I guess I'm just gonna,
Do you have any
Uber.
photos of what a diamond-shaped
as a matter of fact, we sort of
To have
do.
one.
looks like?
Because we've been looking at it. So I guess you look for that, and I'm gonna just go on. This is an R5 zone. The lot is 9,278 square feet, 14,500 is required. However, this
Allowed to see it.
addition, oh,
Well, obviously, it's not gonna be part of evidence, but if you just sort of wanna see a
I'm just
visual
curious
appearance
to
of what
see
it looks
would
like,
look yeah.
go ahead.
and we
Yeah.
could provide it, I guess, tomorrow. I could provide it.
Well, if you want a decision tonight,
Pardon?
no point in providing
Well, I
it
mean, I could
tomorrow.
give you a copy of the, I sort of did that with the tape. No, let's just slow down. Okay. I just wanted to, I'm sorry. The addition on this house is only 181 square feet. Okay. The building coverage, even though the site is undersized, remember it's only 9,278 square feet and 14,500 is required. The allowable building coverage is 18%. We're only at 16.4. The allowable lot coverage is 35%, we're at 26.3. The building height is, at 27 feet, where we're allowed to be at 32. So the addition that we're adding is relatively modest. It's really 3 front yards with one side yard. So back here, I'm really supposed to be at 12 or 16 feet above, 18 feet high, and I'm at 20 feet back there. The only 2 variances that we're looking for tonight are the 2 front yard variances. So
And your argument is that this is a hardship?
yes, it's a C1, I'd say, because of the existing building placement, right, and the
And the
shape
shape of the lot?
of the existing shape of the lot. Right, there are no trees being removed as part of this work. And that's it for me, I guess, for now. Can I, questions?
Is there anyone in the audience present or on the board who have any questions for either of these 2 witnesses? Anyone in the audience who has any questions for these 2 witnesses? Is there anyone in the audience who has a statement he or she would like to make with respect to this application? Come forward, be sworn, give your name and address, please.
I do. Lynn Ranieri, Lynnranieri, at 94 Oakview Terrace in Short Hills. I'm with the Historical Society, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the Historical Society. I would just like to make a couple comments on the proposed application about this house, which is an important house in the area. The information that I found was from an online source from a young man who is a home inspector in Washington, D.C., and he said he was visiting this area to see that house. He said, I'm rewriting my 380,000-word home inspection manual, including illustrations this time, and of all the slate roofs I have seen, the Robin Hood Cottage, which is the nickname for this house, is the most impressive, and I wanted pictures of that roof in the book. He said his uncle, Arthur Engler, built that home, and he stopped and talked to the homeowner about it. Homeowner invited him in. In regard to the question about the slate in the roof, he says, he adds before I get into the slate roof, I believe Robin Hood Cottage was the first built in the development and was used initially as the sales office. I have no other confirmation other than his comment about his uncle telling him that. The slate is Vermont slate, I'm sure, because of the colors, grays, greens, purples, and browns. The weight of the roof is enormous. 25 tons, according to his uncle Arthur, or 40 tons, according to the man who lived in there. This home has appeared in many early magazines, 1926, 1932, and others. And this is from the Your Home magazine, which I managed to cut off the year, I think it was in the 20s. And there was a comment in there I found interesting in light of what Tim has suggested about the inside changes. Huge timbers have been used with good effect in the interior, the pieces having been taken from an old barn more than 100 years old. So the house is almost 100, and some of the timbers, the huge timber, and they are, I was in there, apparently another 100 years older than that. So I would be loath to see something happen to those huge timbers. And that same magazine article, roof slate in variegated colors, laid close to the weather. I have no idea what that means. And varying in thickness from 1.5 inches at the eaves to 1/4 inch at the ridge. This is a picture that man whose uncle, do you need to do something with this, have a copy? Because I have 2 of them if you want one.
Well, if you're going to let us keep a copy, then we can mark it as an exhibit A1.
Okay, the copy I'll give you though is my initial, it's too dark photo.
Okay.
This is a photo that that young man whose uncle.
This is the one I'm keeping.
That young man whose uncle built the place gave. The roof is the most dramatic part of this house, I think, as you can see.
I'll start on this
And
one.
I am
Yes,
delighted
okay.
to hear that the homeowner is interested in keeping that original part of the house and the roof. As Tim said, though, there was some discussion over the standing seam metal roof that was proposed for that middle section. And I felt it looked very contemporary and not in character with the rest of the house. So they showed me the picture of that diamond patterned metal roof, and I felt it was a little more in character with the house. And just a last comment that regarding Bernhard Muller, who was a very important architect in that section, and not just here. He studied at the, I never studied French in high school, so forgive me if I mangle this, at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, and then opened his own office in New York City in 1914. And this Wikipedia entry says Muller was noted for his design of small suburban houses in Short Hills, Maplewood, and Millburn, mostly of the Tudor English motif, which was characteristic of his home in Millburn. He was elected to membership in the American Institute of Architects in 24, and a member of the New York City chapter, and then finally he attained the status of emeritus member of the AIA in 1952. He knew what he was doing, and it's a beautiful house, and I think it is really the entrance to that Nottingham area, an important house, and I'd like to see care exercised with that wonderful roof and with the huge timbers that are apparently another 100 years older than the house. Thank you.
Can you ask a question? Is this?
Questions?
Oh, sorry. Can you ask a question?
No, it's not 80, I think.
Questions
Yes.
from board members?
Oh, hi. I was curious about your opinion. You know, you said that you prefer the diamond shape to the original proposed metal roof. What is your opinion about trying to match the slate for the entire roof?
Good preservation according to the Secretary of the Interior standards for preservation. Say that when you do an addition to a house, you should not have it match exactly. It should be compatible with the old part of the house, but not identical, so that you can read the history of the house. So I don't have a problem with using an alternate material there, because people can then come along and say, oh, I see, that must be the original part of the house, and this must be the new part of the house, as long as it's compatible. And I didn't feel that the vertical stainless steel metal roof was compatible with the character of the house. Okay.
Any other questions from board members? Anyone in the audience have any questions of this witness? Is there anyone in the audience who has a comment he or she would like to make with respect to this application? If not, close the public portion of the meeting. I'll start. There's, I think, a big problem here for me, but I think that I took an oath of office when I took this job a long time ago, and it was to abide by the laws of the United States and the state of New Jersey and the municipality. So here we have two variances that are before this board. It's perfectly obvious to anyone who looks at this property that if the 40-foot setback from each street were imposed on this property, there would be no property. So if there's ever been a case that I've seen on this board that fits the characteristic of, or the character of hardship, because of the nature of the lot, this is it. I have visited the property, as I'm sure every board member has, and it is a priceless part of this community. And I, for one, be very unhappy to see, anything done to it, but I understand that that's not within my control, or in my judgment, not within the control of this board. The question is, should we grant the variances? Is there a hardship, a C1 hardship here? And in my judgment, the answer is clearly yes. So I don't think that we have a choice but to grant the variances. I'm pleased to know that from the lips of the one person who I respect more on this subject matter than anyone else in this town, there have been discussions, and that she is not terribly distressed with the nature of the proposed improvements and expansion and the materials that are being proposed to be used. But I think that we have a very limited jurisdiction here. It is to determine whether or not there's a hardship on the setbacks. And the answer, in my mind, is absolutely yes.
I have a house on a corner lot, I thought two front yards was bad, and to have 3 front yards.
Yeah, that's even worse, right?
I have a comment. I'm just very happy that you have found the house and it's in your good hands. And I know from the testimony tonight that you're going to take good care of it.
I want it to look like it was plucked out of the mountains of Switzerland and plopped there, just big enough to hold a family.
Well, it's a treasure and a gateway treasure.
It's gorgeous. I mean, I've been looking at it for 30 years going, wow, that's cute. But, you know, after going inside, it was kind of like, I can't believe people were able to live here for, yeah,
They were very
especially.
special people who lived in that house in the way that they did, yeah.
It has a history. It has a history.
It has a history, yes.
Anyone else? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
I think the second was Mary.
I proposed Mary. Second.
Mary McNett?
Yes.
Rick Lightner?
Yes.
Joyce Segal?
Yes.
Wolfgang Torres?
Yes.
Barry Marshall?
Yes.
Jessica Blatt?
Please take good care of it, yes.
Julie Steiner?
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. One more case.
So hot.
All right, this is the applicant Performers Theater Workshop, Inc. Property is at 131 Millburn Avenue. Now, since there's only one case left to be heard, I'm assuming you folks are here on this case. I invite you to come down front where you can see the exhibits and hear the testimony. These are not, first of all, these microphones are not working. Even if they were working, they are recording microphones, not amplifying microphones. So if you come down front, you can see what's going on and hopefully hear what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Anthony Sorsillo. I'm with the law office of Levitt and Sorsillo, and we are from Millburn. And I am on behalf of Performers Theater Workshop, who seeks to occupy the ground and lower floors as a performing arts studio at 131 Millburn Avenue. The principals are prospective property owner who also seeks to renovate a vacant residential apartment into an office as an incidental use to the performing arts studio. The ground and lower floors are currently vacant and last occupied by Sharma Holistic Center as a medical office. There are a total of 3 residential apartments. One I mentioned was vacant and is seeking to be converted into an office for the business use. The other 2 apartments are occupied and not changing. The subject property is in the residential office RO zoning district. Performers Theaters is owned by Dean Kravitz, who has 30 years of experience, at least, in the performing arts studio business. Performers Theater seeks approval to relocate its existing studio in Maplewood to Millburn. However, the proposed use requires a use variance. We believe the testimony will show and that you will find special reasons that the site is particularly suitable for a performing arts studio. That the studio will have no substantial detriment to the community, and it will not substantially impair the township zoning ordinance and master plan. We further believe that you will find performing arts studio to be beneficial to the community, and that it will promote the general welfare and well-being of children. In addition to the use variance, the applicant seeks a variance from the requirements of on-site parking and a loading space. The property does have 13 on-site parking spaces, but there is no existing loading space. The proposed uses with the 2 apartments, with the studio and the incidental office, these uses require 22 parking spaces. In addition, we seek preliminary and final site plan approval and waivers from submitting an environmental impact statement and compliance with the stormwater drainage provisions of your ordinance. We've received 5 township agency reports. The witnesses are ready to speak about them if the board has questions. Proof of service was filed in May. I have 4 witnesses: architect John Buchholz, husband and wife Dean and Elizabeth Kravitz, and professional planner Richard Keller, and he's also an engineer.
Before you begin, I would like to have our zoning officer sworn. Eileen, I have, I think, 2 questions. The application says somewhere, and I can't put my finger on it right now, that the Performers Theater Workshop use is not permitted anywhere in the township. Is that correct?
That's probably accurate, yes.
And the application goes on to say that the proposed or the required parking spaces are 22. If the use is not a permitted use, how can there be a requirement of 22 parking spaces?
You probably use the retail requirement, and probably have to just.
That's correct, Ms. Abbott.
I thought you usually use the retail as
Typically, we'll use the retail
as the
standard.
default standard.
As the default standard, because we don't, it's typically addressed as part of site plan approval, but not having an actual standard, that's just in order to use something.
So do you agree that with the using the retail standard for the proposed use as a performing arts studio and school, do you agree that including the apartments, and the office, that 22 parking spaces would be required?
Using that requirement, yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Chairman, or members of the board?
Proceed.
Mr. John Buchholz.
Yes, I do. John Buckholz, Buchholz. My offices are at 123 Columbia Turnpike in Florham Park.
Please give the board the benefit of your credentials in the academic and work fields of architecture.
Bachelor of Architecture from Pratt in 1979, licensed in New York and New Jersey in 1982. Got licenses in Connecticut and Florida. All are up to date. I've appeared before this board many times, as well as other boards across the state. And just as recently as a month ago, this board, and everything else is up to date in terms of my certifications.
Qualifications are accepted.
Thank you.
Mr. Buckles, did you prepare any plans for this evening?
Yes, I did.
Tell the board what you prepared and please explain what's depicted.
Council, this is the exact same drawing.
There's no need to
of
mark
exhibit.
it.
Okay. A1, I prepared dated April 4th, 2019. This is an illustration of the existing building. This is a two-story wood frame construction building, 5B, totally timber. It is it looks from the outside like a two-family house, could be a two-family house, but it is medical offices on the first floor in the basement currently, or was, it's vacant now, and there are several apartments upstairs. It looks residential, it's consistent with the neighborhood and the street buildings that are across here. One of the things that we're doing is we're really not changing anything on the outside. What you see there today, other than these new owners will be painting, providing more landscaping and fixing up the exterior. We're not proposing anything different to the exterior of the building. It will look the same as you drive past it, with the exception of a conforming sign that will be on the front. Today, there's a signpost that sticks out there that has a medical office sign. It will be the same exact sign area and size as it stands today. So the drawing that I just indicated, A1, the first floor is the lower right-hand corner. The parking is in the back. Mr. Keller will go over the site plan of where this is. There is no parking in the front. This is Millburn Avenue here. The light is directly in front. There's a jewelry store on the side here. Bridgewood goes up the side here. The entrance comes around the back and into the back of this building. So what there is on this first floor, there is access from the back. There's some stairs to a patio, in which if you go in the right-hand door, you'll go into the first floor that was medical offices. The left-hand door takes you upstairs to what is apartments today. In the front of the building, there's a stoop with stairs that would enter in from the front. This is not meant to be the primary entrance. It wasn't used as a primary entrance for the medical offices. This is here, so it looks like your typical residential house. It's really just a stage. It's there. If you have to leave in an emergency, you can get out the front, you can have access out the front, but it's really there for the vernacular looking like a residential house in a typical neighborhood, and it looks like a standard. So the first floor right now looks as you see it. There's a waiting room, a receptionist. All of this, we're going to break this into with a movable wall. So the space that's utilized inside will be larger group rooms in the front towards the roadway where there's more noise on the roadway. These are more private lessons, one-on-one, a little bit less noise here. We are surrounded by neighbors. We do have people that are in the other residential homes. You'll hear the owners, there's performing arts, there's song, there's dance. So they are doing things for theatrical purposes of learning within the building. So we've placed the larger group activities in the basement as well as in the front of the building, so it's away from any neighbors that are to the right side if you're looking for Millburn Avenue and the back side. The left lower side is the basement. There's a staircase that comes down from the second floor. You can go left or you can go right. There's currently an existing wall here. We're opening up this wall, so it's a larger group lesson area. Larger group lesson area. There's a small break room back here, storage rooms and mechanical. This room exists. This room is just getting larger. We're just modifying the storage room. The break room is there, the storage room is there, the mop sink is there, and the mechanicals are there. So everything is there. This building sits about 2/3 in the ground, 1/3 out of the ground. There are glass block windows in this space, so it doesn't open. It's gonna be mechanically ventilated and cooled and heated. So you're not gonna have windows that open, so that whatever is being performed in this area will not affect anyone on the outside. And the other thing we're trying to do is on both of these, we're gonna add more insulation between the rooms, between the floors, and around the outside as we can. What they're trying to do is to keep the sound within the rooms and the sound from the street from coming into these rooms, because there is some recording of different things. So basically, same thing again, the back is smaller, a little bit larger for the front. The larger studios are downstairs. Upstairs, there's 2 apartments on the 2nd floor. This apartment will remain. This is their offices. There's a sound room back here that'll be well insulated. This is for certain things that they send out for resumes and different events for advertising. This is some video portion of what they will do. This is meant to be quieter areas. It is towards the front again, so we're careful that the noise doesn't affect what they're doing here. This is why the sound studio is in the back. But again, we really haven't changed any of the rooms in the space. They are really walking into this space almost as is today. It's really going to be finishes that are going to be changed in this space. Other than we are covering across this window so that the sound can't come in from the back, a plane, a car beeping. They are planning on recording in this room video so that this is isolated from the rest of the space. So in the back, the window will still be there. It will have film in the window, and from the back, it will look like the house does today. So essentially, I didn't get a chance to do a great facade or change anything to the exterior, or it's really going to be when we get done with it, it's how well I insulate it, how well I can soundproof it, and how well I can change the finishes. So basically, it's all interior alterations, but to the exterior, it remains the same.
I have one question. Both in the documents and in your testimony, you talked about 2 apartments on the 2nd floor. I only see 1.
Well, there's an apartment here, this is the 2nd apartment here, and there's...
So
They're keeping 1 apartment.
you're keeping only 1. That's the proposal?
There's one on the 3rd floor, Mr. Steinberg, so there's existing...
You don't have a 3rd floor
No,
drawing here?
It's an attic, so it's...
But there's an apartment up there?
That exists, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
When you say you're keeping the apartment, do you mean that it's going to be rented?
Yes.
It's currently rented, currently occupied with tenancies.
And that's going
And the one that's being converted to office is vacant currently?
Correct, yes.
Are there plans for when the apartment becomes, if it's rented, when the lease is up to then convert it over to or the plans are to always keep it an apartment?
Well, as it sits today, it is an apartment, and they're gonna use it in its current format and layout. This is the other apartment, the one that's upstairs, so those will stay as is, so I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
You're not.
You're not.
The question was, do you know if there are any plans by the applicant to convert one or both of the apartments to use it to the other use of the proposed use of the building?
No, in all the discussions I've had, and the owners can speak to it, no, this is the only apartment which will be converted to the school. These 2 will remain as is, and there are no plans to do anything other than...
That's what you were told.
Yes.
Any other questions from
Mr.
board?
Steinberg, the principals are here.
Yes, I understand. Any other questions for the architect? Is there anyone in the audience who has any questions for the architect? This is the time in the testimony when we ask people to come forward and ask questions if you have any. And if you come forward, you do not have to be sworn, and you can ask your question, and the witnesses have to answer the questions. At the end of the hearing, we will give everyone an opportunity to come forward, be sworn under oath, and give statements if you'd like to do that.
Mr. Steinberg, if I could, some of this is architectural, report from the fire department. There are 3 items. One of them is the typical copy, in which, as the architect, will provide the fire department with a copy of our drawing. Yes, we will send that over to the fire department. There's also the look, the option, we have to put the Knox box in. That will be shown on my drawing, so that will be put on the building when going in for building permits. And they will post the number, the correct number, on the building as requested.
So you're saying that the applicant agrees to comply with the fire department report?
Yes.
With that exception, or is there an exception?
No, no exception, as per requested.
Can you address any other reports, or will Mr. Keller?
I think Mr. Keller will.
I see no other questions from either the board or the audience, so next witness.
I call husband and wife,
Fine.
Dean Kravitz and Elizabeth Kravitz.
This is called team testimony.
I
do. Dean Kravitz, D-E-A-N, K-R-A-V-I-T-Z.
And Elizabeth Kravitz.
Mr. Kravitz, are you the sole owner of Performers Theater Workshop?
Yes.
Tell the board, if any, your educational and professional credentials in the performing arts business.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the honor of being here and the potential to bring Performers Theater Workshop to Millburn. I feel that Millburn is such a wonderful community, and I feel Performers Theater Workshop is such a wonderful place. And I just want to start with that I think it's a really wonderful synergy. To answer your question. Yes, so I'm going to start a little bit with the history because we've been around for 38 years. My parents, who were Juilliard graduates, founded the school. So that's part of the credentials of our school is where it came from. They met at Juilliard. I'm a Yale graduate, Yale University. I have my BA in music from Yale, and I have my master's in education. And and I'm also certified as a teacher in New Jersey, and I taught in Chatham Public Schools for 14 years. So I also wrote music for TV and radio commercials, produced music for TV and radio commercials for many years, played with many famous musicians and artists, and have a wealth of musical background. As far as, I also studied at Westminster Choir College, University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and Eastman School of Music. So I bring a lot of expertise in both music and the arts, as well as education, and how to make those two happen in a really special way for children.
And Mrs. Kravitz, if you could tell the board your educational background as well.
Yes, I have a bachelor's in, with a majors in English, education, and psychology. I have master levels classes towards special ed. I taught previously in the Boston Public Schools as a special ed teacher, and then was a director of a residential educational program. And I've been running the School Performers Theater Workshop with my husband for the last 10 years.
Mr. Kravitz, if the board approves your application, will this be an additional location or a replacement location?
It's going to be a replacement location.
Where are you currently?
Great. So currently we're at 1 Pearson Road, which is the corner of Valley Road and Pearson Road in Maplewood. And we're going to be, instead of being at that location for our studio, we also, in place of that, we would like to move to Millburn.
Mr. Kravitz, why did you select 131 Millburn Avenue as a suitable location for this studio?
Thank you. So when my mom created the school, she created it to be a theater home for young people to learn and grow in singing, dancing, and acting with the highest caliber of teaching. So from the very beginning, many of our teachers had come in from New York City, been in Broadway shows. So it's about quality, education, caring, warmth. And first of all, I feel like Millburn is a place that really treasures the arts, and there's a sense of wanting to do things to be at full potential. And I love the fact that we could be a part of Millburn. Also, the location now, when Liz and I were looking around, we looked so many places, and this place has a feeling of a home. And it started at my parents' house at 151 North Wyoming Avenue in South Orange, and that was their home. And then we moved to 1 Pearson Road, and when we designed the outside of that, we wanted to feel like a place in the Berkshires or something that really had that feeling of warmth. And this wonderful building has that warmth to it, and it's in a place where people who live in Millburn can easily access it. People who live in Maplewood can easily access it as well. But we fell in love with it. And I also think the fact that the entrance is from the side and it's really tucked in there is nice, because our school has a feeling of a small, almost like a hometown caring feeling. And we didn't want it on a busy street where there's a lot of that. We wanted it to have that warmth, so like a real community.
Mr. Cox, tell the board the types of artistic sessions that are offered.
Great, thank you. So we offer acting lessons, we offer dance lessons, and we offer singing lessons. We also have a professional track where we train young people to be in Broadway, film, TV, and there's really, as well as teaching the actual pursuits of the disciplines, we're teaching work ethic, self-esteem, self-confidence, cooperating with others. So there's really, when my mom created the mission, she really created something where we're teaching the arts, but we're also teaching kids how to be good people in the community. It's a non-competitive atmosphere. So part of the culture is really supporting each other. And I think that's a wonderful thing to have. In any town would love to have that as part of their community. But I'd be very proud to have that in Millburn.
Are sessions solo, groups?
Great. So we have a combination of private lessons and small group classes. Our model is lots of specialized instruction. So most of our classes have between 2 and 10 students. And when the class, once we fill up our registration, we split the class so it maintains to be small classes. So the model is private lessons, one-on-one, and then we have small group classes, and then we also have master classes where we bring in professionals from top casting directors, agents, and managers from New York City, and they give master classes to professional track students.
Tell the board the days and hours of operation of this studio.
Great. So most of our classes happen on Saturdays at St. George's Church in Maplewood, and that's not going to change. We have 13 big size rooms there, so all of our large dance classes happen there.
Where is this again?
Maplewood. St. George's Church. It's on Ridgewood Road. And so most of our action happens there, and it makes sense because they have a big parking lot, it's a big building, it makes sense. The small group classes happen, the smaller classes and the private lessons happen midweek, Monday through Friday. And then some of the master classes that we have, that I mentioned, the professional track, they happen on Sundays.
And you at Maplewood are using the church as well for these large performances?
Yeah. We actually have the vocal recital is at St. George's Church, and we perform in New York City at this wonderful place called Don't Tell Mama Cabaret, which is in the Broadway Theater District, and we've been performing there since 1999. every year. So we do that, and we also have performances at Maplewood Middle School and Bloomfield Colleges. So all our performances happen off-site, except for the Maplewood, St. George's Church has a beautiful room there where we do our vocal recital.
Tell the board the credentials of some of your staff.
Oh, great, thanks. So we have Brian Leffler, who has been teaching with us for 23 years now, was the dance captain of Grease on Broadway for 3 years. He was also in the international tour of West Side Story as Riff and in the national tour of Oklahoma as Will Parker, and has won many choreography awards.
Bachelor's and master's.
Bachelor's in both at Notre Dame, right?
And his master's degree.
At Notre Dame as well, right? Yeah. So he's fantastic. We have Beth Southard, who is Christine in Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. We have Gary Mao, who was what's the name of the Christine and the Phantom. How could I forget that? Phantom in the Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. We have, it's kind of endless, but it's a good thing. Joanna Young was in Drowsy Chaperone on Broadway, was in Les Mis on Broadway, and Natalie Cortez was Morales in Chorus Line Revival recently on Broadway, and Anita in West Side Story on Broadway. And it goes on and on. Stephanie Kurtzuba was in The Wolf of Wall Street with Leonardo DiCaprio. So we have an incredibly expert staff, but warm and caring at the same time.
Your students, where do they mostly come from? What towns?
Great. So I think about we looked it up, and Millburn Short Hills has the biggest constituent of children. So the highest percentage come from Millburn Short Hills, and then Maplewood and South Orange, and then outside. I think it's around 27% of our students are from Millburn Short Hills.
Tell the board, with respect to your existing studio, but more importantly, your proposed studio, how do you organize semesters or whatever you call it?
Great. So we have 10-week semesters for fall and spring, and then we have a 6-week semester for midwinter. And most of the classes happen during those 10 limited weeks in fall. We take a few weeks off for the holiday. We do 6 weeks of preparing for our New York City showcase, and then we take a few weeks off for President's that vacation. We do 10-week semester for spring, and then we have 3 summer sessions. And the summer sessions tend to be kind of less busy than the fall and spring. They're just kind of between 10 and 15 students for the day.
How do you organize your sessions with respect to students who are in one field and other students who are in different fields?
Great. So my father came up with a great model many, many years ago, and that was have them come for their acting class and then go right into their voice class and have a 15-minute break, and then go into their dance class and then have a 15-minute break and go into their private lesson. And so most of our students do those back-to-back kind of classes. So that's it's great for the parents because they can have their son take guitar and songwriting and dance and acting all in the same place with one drop-off and one pickup.
What are the days and hours for these sessions at the proposed studio?
Okay, so Monday, our classes happen 4:30 to 8:45. Tuesday, they happen 2:45 to 4:45 for the young ones, the 5 to 6-year-olds. And then we have a little break there, then 5:45 to 8:45 on Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday are later days. There's only 1 or 2 classes at a time there. And Fridays is just private lessons. Saturday we have...
Wait, you lost me after Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Start again with Wednesday.
Let me go a little slower. Okay. I'll go with Wednesday?
Start with Wednesday.
Okay, great. So 4:15 to 8:15. And then Thursday is 4:30 to 7:45. Friday, no classes, just private lessons. Saturday, 10:45 to 12:45. And everything is staggered. Being a public school teacher for many, many years, I know a lot about, I have a love for good logistics. So many years ago, we realized, okay, if there's a 15-minute break in between the classes, there's time for travel and in and out. So it greatly reduces the traffic flow, both inside and outside of the building. So it's been really well planned and vetted over the last 10 years.
What is the average amount of students and teachers and personnel on set at one time?
Okay, so our busiest day has, for the midweek at the studio, has 6 different teachers. And the biggest, most of our classes, I'm looking at this past year, most of the classes have either 2 or 4 or 6 students in them. We had 2 classes with 8 students. So that kind of gives you a feel for the class size. And as far as the traffic going in and out, so let's say the Broadway bound level has 8 students. 2 of those students are one's taking a private lesson right before, one's taking a private lesson right after. So there's actually, and usually we have 2 on each wing, so it's maybe 3 or 4 coming at once, even though it's a class of 8, if that makes sense to you.
Does your studio have any relationship with the municipalities, schools, organizations?
Yeah, so we provide after-school program for Deerfield School. We've done it for many, many years. We provide after-school things for Hartshorn over the years. We have a lot of students who've been leads in the Millburn Middle School show. Some represented over here, and many who have been leads and in the chorus ensemble for the Millburn High School show. So usually every year we have at least 2 to 7 kids in each of those shows. And usually many of the leads are our students, which is a very exciting thing. I'm forgetting a few things about we have other connections with the Millburn. Or is that basically?
I think that's it.
Okay, just a lot of Millburn students.
Happy to have more.
Happy to have all that great stuff, and it's really exciting to go to the shows. Oh, this is the other connection. 2 of our teachers, one of them, Natalie Cortez, choreographed the Millburn High School production for the last 2 years, and another one, Rachel Cohn McKenna, directed the Millburn High School production in the last 2 years. So there's a lot of synergy there and collaboration and complementary things going on.
No further questions at this time for the witnesses.
I need to clarify a few things. So, staff, that includes the 2 of you, not you.
I certainly am involved. Most of it is through the computer or through the phone. Administrative
Okay.
and from at home. I have 2 young, well, they're not so young anymore, but I
So
have 2
you're not
boys.
gonna be working up in that office, or no, you'll be
Hopefully
working from
not.
home, okay. So,
We have 2 14-year-old boys, twins,
okay,
and
so I got Brian, Beth, Gary, Joanna, Natalie, Stephanie, and Rachel.
We have even more because on Saturdays we have 13 classes going at once.
Not on site.
Not on site.
In Millburn or in Maplewood.
In Maplewood
Right.
at St. George's Church.
Okay.
We have just a few at a time that are teaching in the studio.
Okay, so, but staff at this site would consist of 13 people at
Yeah, what I
various
would do-
times,
I
or
think this
7
will take the
people at
mystery out of
various
it.
times?
7 at the most at one time.
Okay,
oh, okay.
7 people at most at this site. You said 2 10-week semesters for fall and spring, and then there was a 6-week session.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the summer sessions? Or was that some other part of the year?
So we have 10 weeks in the fall.
Right.
And during the 10 weeks of the fall, we have a lot of students. We see around 150 to 200 students. Most of them are on Saturday at St. George's Church. Then we have a 6-week semester, which is closer to 60 students.
But that's not a summer session.
That's not a summer session. The spring is very similar to the fall. It's another 10 weeks. And all of our students, when they sign up, they're signing up for the whole semester. So it's not, the numbers don't vary, the week schedule doesn't vary. It's 10 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks. And in the summer, we have a 1-week session and then 2 3-week sessions. And that's usually around 10 or 20 students. And they come for
And
the
how
full
many
day.
students during the 6-week semester?
The midwinter, I would say there's a total of about 60, but it's staggered throughout the day.
Okay.
So we have the youngies, there are like 6 to 8 of them perform in the New York City showcase, the younger showcase. And then a couple hours later, we have the middle students. They have their own showcase that they do in New York City. A couple hours later, the older students come. It's really well planned out so that things are staggered and spread throughout the day.
Okay.
So at any one time, there aren't
60 people there.
Yeah, not even
Now,
close.
Friday, you said is only private lessons. What are the hours of those private lessons?
It's 3:45 to 8:45.
There's the potential till 8:45, but typically we like to be done sooner.
Yeah, usually on Fridays, we're out by 6 o'clock or 7.
Okay.
Now, I was mentioning the classes before. There are some days where the private lessons, like one student there, starts at 3:45, but it's one student. So the hours I gave you were the classes, the group classes.
Okay.
Do you want me to give you the? What's that?
You can offer this.
Okay. Can I show her this? Because I think this will.
Well, no, if you're giving me something, then it's gotta be marked, and you're not gonna get it back.
Okay.
My point to you is Monday through Saturday. You only indicated afternoon hours. Are you telling me there's other stuff happening earlier in the day?
Oh, so we just do office preparation for the day.
Okay, so you might be there may be some staff there, but there's not students.
Yeah, low burner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the average number of people on site at any time, I know you said 6 teachers.
Yes.
You indicated each teacher might have 2, 4, 6, or 8 students. I thought that's what you said.
Yes, there's one class that has a musical director and a director in it that are performing classes.
Okay.
So that's 2 of the 6.
Okay, so what I want you to tell me is, what is the largest number of people, teachers and students, that might be on site at any one time?
Usually,
Like this sliver.
right. So this sliver here is 14. 14. Can I give this to you because you see it seems to be wanting to. No. Just answer it. Okay. Just answer it. Okay. All right.
We're doing
so
the math.
I'm trying to do the math. It's about 14 students. 16 students and 6 teachers.
Now, how often is that?
6
That's
teachers,
at
16
our
students.
busiest.
Right.
That's at your busiest time.
Right.
22, roughly 22 people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And how often is that?
That is on Mondays at 6:45
PM?
p.m. Yeah.
Oh, God. Our model intentionally is small because we give our students a great deal of personal attention. To have more students, we wouldn't be able to provide the level of instruction and support that we do.
Right, I'm just trying to get a magnitude of how many people are gonna be on the property at any one time.
Right.
Sure.
The master classes that we have typically are 22.
Mr. Crowder, you say master class. I don't even know what that means.
Okay. On Sundays, we have from 1 to 5.
Just 5 times a year.
5 days a year, 6 days a year. We have the industry professionals coming in from New York City that teach. So we might have 20 to
Here,
25.
at this property,
Yes.
not St. George?
Correct.
Okay.
That's a special occasion.
It's a very special occasion.
Okay.
But there's usually not any other teachers because there's that one person coming in from New York
Right.
City, and there's some more kids, but fewer teachers, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Do you maintain this type of schedule in your current location?
Yes. This,
And how many parking spaces do you have in Maplewood?
we're allotted 7 spaces where we are.
Is there a problem with traffic and parking in Maplewood at your location?
We have been able to make it work with 7, so I know that if we can make it work with 7, we have, I think we have,
Rich will get into
he'll get into the exact numbers. We have more here that I know. So there's, so this will give us more opportunity. And most of the things are drop off or pick up. The parents aren't really staying. Maybe we'll have 2 or 3 parents staying in the lobby at most, but usually they, the student texts and says, "Hey, Dad, I'm ready," or the parent texts the student when they're there, when the father gets there, and then the student goes out. So it's not a lot of people parking and
Okay.
that kind of thing.
At least 2, perhaps more, of our teachers are coming in from New York, so they take the train, which is another reason why this is a very attractive building to us, because they can walk from the station.
Yeah, Brian Leffler, who I was telling you about, he lives in New York City. He always takes the train. He doesn't own a car. John O'Neill, one of the musical directors that works with us, he takes public transportation or he walks. I live 3 blocks away from the location, so I'll be walking. So it's going to be, most of the teachers are many of them are coming not with vehicles.
Do you have any?
Any questions from board members?
Yeah, to what extent are you going to be using amplified instruments or percussion instruments?
So the principle of having the different rooms is so that they're soundproofed from one to the other. So my concern when I'm putting it together is that you don't hear anything like one small wall away, because we're recording voiceovers for professional purposes, things like that. So when you talk about soundproofing, we're not saying like, okay, we're going to have like a heavy metal band. It's really not that. It's a piano, and I'm looking at making sure that when we're recording our voiceover, there's no sound.
The only time we use drums is during our shows, but those are off-site.
Okay, that was, okay.
Any other questions from board members? I have only one. When Anne Hathaway comes out, does she take the train?
She was a student at PTW.
Where's she?
Did you know that?
No.
Is that what you asked?
No.
Yeah. So she many
Well, I knew she
moons
was at
ago.
Millburn High.
My mother taught her.
Okay, great.
Yeah, at Performers Theater Workshop, song interpretation.
Next witness.
Mr. Keller?
Unless, wait a minute. Are there any questions for these 2 witnesses from anyone in the audience? Next witness.
Yes, I do. Richard Keller, Keller.
Mr. Keller, what are your credentials in the fields of professional engineering and professional planning?
Sure, I'm a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey, licensed as a planner in 1990 and as an engineer in 1989. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering with a declared concentration in water resources and environmental engineering from Rutgers University. And I also hold a master's degree in architecture with a declared concentration in urban planning and design, and that is from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, where I was also an adjunct professor for approximately 11 years. I have appeared before this board, the planning board, approximately 110 boards throughout the state of New Jersey as both an engineer and planner. I've also provided both engineering and planning services to a number of boards of adjustment and planning boards throughout the state of New Jersey. My licenses are good in effect since I last testified here 20 minutes ago.
Your qualifications as a planner are accepted.
And as an engineer.
And as an engineer.
Can you take a course in air conditioning?
Yeah, please.
Rich, what did you just pass out?
A1, he passed out.
Passing out A1, which is a photo board number 1, prepared by Casey and Keller, it's dated 5/20/2019. It contains 4 photographs of various pedigree Street. Photograph number 1 in the upper corner is a view of the subject property on the left of 131 and 127 Millburn Avenue, and the street to the north. And then we come around on Ridgewood. There's the entrance into the parking lot for the building that fronts on Millburn Avenue and the chiropractic office next to it. Photograph number 3, so both those were taken by myself yesterday. Photograph number 3 is a picture of the corner of Ridgewood and Millburn Avenue where Vauxhall comes in. That is 139 Millburn Avenue looking northeast. That is from Google Street View, and that shows the Anastasio Jewelers that forms the corner of and the terminus of the RO zone in that area. Photograph number 4 is an aerial view of the property taken from nearmap.com. The image date is April 22nd, 2018. It's a 1:20 scale. And it shows the location of the property. It's kind of unique in its shape as it's sort of a funny parallelogram that then reaches a leg out to Ridgewood Road where the driveway is. There are 13 existing parking spaces located on the site. The building actually occupies the primary frontage. It has no walk up or walk access. To the front there is a front stoop, but it's not used. There's some foundation landscaping, a couple planting beds, and there's trees on either side. And you can see its location within the community. The property is located near the intersection, as I indicated. It's approximately 11,250 square feet, or just over a quarter of an acre. It is located in the RO zone. I'll go briefly back to our drawing use variance site plan dated 2/9/2019, which is part of your application package. That shows the, if we look in the upper left corner of the area map, you can see that where the RO zone terminates across the street is the OR2 zone. That's where the Millburn veterinary facilities are. And then Anastasio Village is on the corner. There's the subject property, which was a doctor's office, and I'll get into the specifics of that in a second, Dr. Sharma's wellness center. There's also a chiropractic wellness center, I shouldn't use the same word, that sits next to us at the corner of Reed Circle. That was the other sort of center hall colonial looking house to the right of us, which does have vehicular access off of Reed Circle, and it also does have a walk up from Millburn Avenue. As you cross Reed, it continues the RO zone up. Directly across the street from us is the R8 zone. Somewhat unique is right across from the street from us, actually on the corner there, is the Exxon station, which has been an ongoing application before the board, and I understand that they're actually coming back again soon. So that's a gasoline station with possibly some form of retail component in the future, which will grant our approval. This RO zone here contains a number of dentists and residences, 2-family houses approved by the Board of Adjustment in 1988, another dental residence. So this is a medical and residential. The next site up is a 2-family house. Then there is a dental with the residence vacant. Then there's a 2-family house that was approved by the Board of Adjustment. And then you go into the OR2 zone where Dr. Gashinsky has his dental practice. And the R6 zone sits behind us. The most recent use on the first floor on the basement was a doctor's office. It was Dr. Sharma's doctor's office. Their services they offered, Dr. Sharma was an internist. She practiced holistic medicine. She also had people, as well as her, who practiced acupuncture. They taught yoga and movement classes. They also provided physical therapy and various alternative medical modalities on the 2 floors in that site. And as indicated, they had 3 apartments, 2 on the 2nd floor and 1 in the attic. Unfortunately, Dr. Sharma died in 2016, I believe, and the space has been, the first floor and basement space have been vacant ever since. It's been on the market, but there's been no takers for the permitted use of a doctor. Unfortunately, the RO zone was really created back in the days of Marcus Welby, MD, when Marcus Welby was on TV, and that was the primary paradigm of sole practitioners, which have given way to the Summit medical groups of the world, and doctors no longer want to live upstairs from their practice. Our ordinance was forward enough many years ago to take away the requirement that the
second floor apartment had to be occupied by the dentist. So now it does not need to be dentist or doctor occupied, but that's the primary use within the zone is single-family residential, and I'll get to the uses in a second, as well as medical uses on the first floor with some restrictions. The applicant is seeking preliminary and final site plan approval, as well as the use variance and another couple of variances. We're also, as John pointed out, other than general cleanup, which is already underway because they rebuilt the back porches and stoops on the building, there are no changes to the facade, other than the applicant has indicated they want to put some black shutters up on each of the windows, which would make it a little more similar, a little more attractive, and the building next door, and the mock-up actually gave the building a little more presence. They would also be right under the pediment. There would be a small sign that would about 2 square feet, which would meet the ordinance requirement, just indicating that it was the Performers Theater Workshop. The application does also request a waiver of the EIS. Since the site is fully developed, there are no additional sanitary sewer loads or water demands. There are no environmentally sensitive areas such as wetlands or steep slopes. Accordingly, we're asking for a waiver of the steep slope, of the environmental impact. If we go to our site data table on the upper corner of our site plan sheet, you'll see that the RO zone is also somewhat unique in that there's no minimum lot area requirements. They do require a 40-foot setback, relatively small rear yard, side yard of 8 feet, and there is no rear yard or side yard combined. Accordingly, the site at 11,254 square feet is compliant since there's no area requirements. There is an existing non-conforming setback of 37.29 where 40 is required. We're not changing that. Building coverage is way under what's permitted. 50% is permitted in the zone. Floor area ratio of 40% is permitted. We're way under again at 27.55. Lot coverage is 65.97. We've got a rather generous front yard. There's no requirement. So essentially, we're in compliance with all of the bulk requirements other than the existing non-conforming front yard of the zoning for the RO zone. We do need a parking variance, and again, using the reference metric that has been often applied for uses that are not identified in our parking requirements. We applied a metric of 1 space per 200 for the proposed use, and then we applied the dental use of 1 per 160. On the site data table, you see when we analyze the existing use for the doctor's office, for the basement and first floor, which were fully used, along with the 3 apartments, we developed a parking demand of 24 spaces were required. Under the proposed condition, when we switched to the medical to an arts studio, we dropped from the 1 per 160 requirement to the more generous 1 per 200 requirement, which means and now with only 2 apartments, we dropped to a requirement of 22 cars. So there's a net reduction in two cars required as a function of the change of the use. In addition to the waiver of the EIS, we obviously need the use variance to permit what we think is a unique use. The parking variance where 22 are required and 13 existing spaces are provided, and then we also need a variance from 607.1, which is for the loading space. I would point out with regard to, before I go into the use variance, the residential 0 zone, the permitted uses are single-family dwellings, which are really not realistic in this location if you've driven by there. Medical professional offices provide they do not exceed 50% of the floor area of the building, and there's no more than 1 licensed medical professional. It's really not the way medical offices work any longer, and as is evidenced by the fact that Dr. Sharma's son has been trying to lease it to a medical use for the last 3 years with no takers. And then finally, the single dwelling unit apartments located in the same structure. Again, this has existed for a number of years with 3 apartments, and there is clearly more than 50% of the floor area is allocated to the apartments. So it doesn't meet any of the permitted uses of the RO zone. But we think it can be granted a use variance under the outlines of the municipal land use ordinance. Obviously, for a D1 variance, we need to demonstrate there are positive criteria, and the positive criteria exists in the fact that we can show there are special reasons, and special reasons are we can show that the project advances any of the 16 purposes of the Land Use Act,
as defined under 4055 D2. And the purposes that are advanced are general welfare, and that the theater arts education complements the high school and paper mill programs within the community. 2G, it provides for a commercial educational use to meet the needs of the community and all New Jersey citizens. This is a unique facility that is moving from a residential neighborhood in Maplewood to a Millburn location to meet the needs of its largest demographic. As such, it brings a sustainable, healthy, long-term business to the community that it serves most, and is now serving second and third generation students. It also contributes to the well-persons of beings, neighborhoods, and communities, and provides a desirable visual environment in the fact that it is an existing building that has had some deferred maintenance since the doctor no longer occupies it, which gives us the opportunity to eliminate another building that's been vacant since January of 2016 when Dr. Sharma passed. This building has been a particular problem in my view. Every time I come into Millburn off of 78 and I come up to that intersection, I'm waiting for that light, and I'm staring at this building and seeing a vacant Center Hall Colonial that is falling into disrepair. And this is an opportunity to provide, to bring that back to life with a use that's actually dovetails nicely with its size and location. Case law also demands that under the Medici that we need to show that we are demonstrating general welfare through a demonstration that the site is particularly suited for the proposed use. And that Cox reminds us that we do not, it does not require that there's no other potential location for that use. There could be another location in the community that might work. And it doesn't demand that we show that a permitted use couldn't work on the site. If we could find a dentist or a doctor, it could work, we just can't find one. Rather, it's an inquiry into whether the property is particularly suited for the proposed use, in the sense, is it well suited for the use in spite of the fact that the use is not permitted in the zone. We believe that the site is particularly suited for this project. The residential vernacular of the building is suited to the operations of creating a safe space in a home-like environment for the theater students. They come from a current facility, they come to treat the current facility as a safe second home to explore and grow. The proposed use is a commercial use to be located in and around other commercial uses. The location is at the nexus of Maplewood and Millburn, the two largest demographics, where 58 of the 258 students currently come from Millburn and Short Hills. It is also close enough to the train so that teachers from New York City can walk. It is approximately the same distance to the train station as their current facility in Maplewood is to the train station, and those teachers walk. So if you're worried it's a little bit long, it's certainly within walkable distance. And it actually provides more than adequate on-site parking for the teachers, staff, and drop-off. Partially, and I'll get into those numbers in a second, but that's partially evidenced by the fact that their current site only has 7. And their unique way of arranging drop-offs and the fact that students stay for 2, 3, 4 sessions means they automatically become staggered, so parents are picking up at off hours. I would also point out, again, the site has not proven viable or in demand for the uses that are permitted within the zone. The site is certainly not suited to many of the permitted uses in the zone, especially single-family residential or sole practitioner medical use. Other C variances that we need, and then I'll do the negative criteria altogether. We need a parking and loading variance. Again, from section 607.1, 1 loading space is required. Per the numbers I went through before, parking variance under C is required for 24 spaces are required, 13 are provided.
No, 22 are required.
I'm sorry, 22 are required, 13 are provided. So that is a deficiency of 9 spaces. And 24. That was the existing one. So before it was 24 were required, 13 were provided. It was a previous deficiency of 11. Under the proposed use, 22 are required, 13 are provided. There's a deficiency of 9. Again, a net reduction in the parking requirement of 2 spaces. Under C, section C, 4055 D70C, the site is fully developed with a more intense array of current uses, that being the medical and residential. The size and shape of the lot combined with the size and location of the lawful existing structure creates a hardship in trying to provide the amount of parking required without demolishing half of the building. We think that also with the loading space, there is actually area for a van or a FedEx to get into the back. there's just not an allocated size that would be consistent with ordinance requirements. So while we can get a loading area in the back for FedEx or UPS to drop off, we're not suggesting they would ever go to Millburn Avenue, since the entrance is at the back of the building. The occasional deliveries of paper goods, stationery, that sort of thing, would come in by a UPS truck or an Amazon truck. They come in, there's enough room for them to circumnavigate and out. There's enough room most of the time that they can actually just temporarily park in one of the existing parking spaces, but it's not going to meet the large loading space requirements of our ordinance, so we've requested a variance from that section. Also, under C1, the shape of the site just doesn't allow us to create a fully conforming loading space. With regard to the negative criteria, again, the two-prong approach, that there's no substantial negative impact to the public good, and there's no substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the master plan. And again, that word substantial is in there because there's always going to be some negative, but is it substantial? Under the public good section, we're supposed to specifically look at the variances effect on the surrounding properties. We think that there is no detriment to the neighborhood, certainly as compared to the existing medical use, which also had extended hours and a large space and a lot of different treatments offered. The use is generally compatible with other commercial uses in the immediate neighborhood. It eliminates a long-time vacant space as a gateway to the community. It provides considerable soundproofing to the internal areas and external portions of the building. The group areas were specifically located in the basement or biased to the front of the building. The parking is adequate for the use mix of tenants. Their existing residential tenants are 2, which leaves 11 spaces available for performance theater workshop. While they have 7 teachers at most 5 may drive. And that's actually on the busiest time. So if we have 5 driving, 5 cars, and again, that was on the worst possible time. Most of the times they thought it'd be 3 or 4. If 5 are available for staff and teachers, 2 for the residences, that leaves 6 available for drop-off. That's only 1 less than they have now, which covers their whole operation. And again, this is a secondary teaching and administration space. The largest classes are on Saturdays and are off-site. Performances are held at off-site multiple locations, including Bloomfield College, as well as New York City, as well as numerous spaces throughout Maplewood. The children attend multiple classes, often staying 2 to 3 hours, which decreases the amount of drop-offs. Multiple class attendance naturally staggers the drop-off and pickup. There are less teachers and staff when the smaller kids are on site, and fewer students. And the classes only occur 32 out of the 52 weeks per year. So we think that there's really no negative impact, and certainly it's an improvement on any possible impacts as related to the doctor's office. Under the no impairment to the master plan and zoning ordinance, the primary goals and objectives of the master plan is, number 1, to encourage appropriate land uses that will promote the character of the township as a small suburb of the highest quality. We think this only enhances that. Goal number 3 actually recognizes and encourages township organizations and activities that strengthen business and social networks. And objective 3.01 under that goal is to provide for the continuing educational and cultural needs of the community. We think that this is no difference in the B4, where the community is looking for more experiential type uses. This use actually, it dovetails, it works in conjunction with the Paper Mill Playhouse has a program, our own strong theater program within the community. They dovetail and work together. So we think it certainly provides for the continuing educational and cultural needs of the community. We do not believe that it is inconsistent with the master plan. And again, when we need a use variance, the Medici says we have an enhanced quality of proof. That's when we must reconcile the omission of the use from the master plan or from those permitted in the zoning district. And the most often cited is generally that such a use is too new to have been contemplated, or that a previously considered use has evolved to a degree that was not contemplated. That's actually not the case here. This is a pretty old use. This is 3rd generation we're dealing with here. In this case, we believe that this type of use is so focused and unique that it was actually not contemplated. And the fact, which would help explain why this use is not permitted in any use in the township. So we're providing, there's no place within the community that would be a permitted use. It's going to be a use variance no matter where. We think this is the appropriate place for it within the community. We think that it's a good application, it's a good use of the site, it's a good opportunity to clean up a gateway focal point into the community. We've taken a look at the reports. We have, police had no issue. John already addressed the fire marshal. The forester indicated there are 5 white ash trees on the property, either on or just off our property. We'll explore which ones, and they either need to be chemically treated for the upcoming and pervasive emerald ash borer or removed. We'll certainly work with Tom Doty to figure that out. There were essentially no comments by Martha Callahan, the township engineer. So we certainly accept any conditions contained in the professional reports.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Questions of this witness? Questions from the audience of this witness? All right, now is the time for anyone who has a statement he or she would like to make to come forward, be sworn, give your name and address.
I do.
Name and address, spelling your name.
Jeffrey, Jeffrey, Braverman, Braverman, 242 Hartshorn Drive, Short Hills. Some of you might remember me. Pretty invested in this town. I have 4 kids, 6 and under, no twins. I own a restaurant in town. I own a swim school in town. I'm hopefully making you proud. Go and visit it. We just got turtles. So I really care deeply about the town. I do these businesses. I shouldn't do them. I've got a lot of other stuff going on, but I do them because I care. And I've got a flight early tomorrow morning, so I'm here for a reason. I have 3 of my 4 kids in PTW. My 4th is not in PTW because my 4th is 16 months old. So he can dance but not sing yet. And I'll talk very briefly because there's far more articulate people than I am, but the program is exceptional. I'm a very skeptical person. Dean could attest to that when he said, no one's ever asked me this many questions as my son was joining their professional track. I can tell you that my son is, my 6-year-old is an extremely shy kid, and to see him get in front of the, what was it called? No, just at school. At Hartshorn School where they've got the talent show, and there's lots of kids going in groups. My son goes up there by himself and just belts something out. To me, it was a very, very proud moment. And just, I don't know what day it is now, but yesterday there was, I guess, this, what was it called? Cabaret night, so kind of a recital thing. And the performances are really exceptional. I had to sit through other recitals at other schools yesterday. I think I went to 3 or 4 different things, literally, and you saw a marked difference between a structure where there was a dance, where my younger girls go to this other place for dance, where there's huge classes compared to the curriculum that you get at PTW. So bottom line is I'm very invested in this town, and I think this is really a great thing to add to Millburn.
Thank you. Any questions of that witness? Anyone else? Come forward. Name and address.
Yes. It's going to be a different one. Zeynep, Zeynep. Last name is Allen, Allyn. Address is 7 Robbins Lane, Short Hills.
It was Allyn?
Yes.
And what was your address again?
7 Robbins Lane, Robbins. My son, I have 3 kids. My oldest has been a part of this community since he's 7 years old. He's 12 now. He is, I don't know if you would call him a professional actor, but he's done quite a lot of professional stuff. He's been trained by Dean since he was a 6-year-old boy. He's been on NBC playing in Peter Pan Live as Markel Darling. He spent the entire year last year from July 2017 to 2018 playing one of the lead roles in Broadway's School of Rock as Billy the Stylist, all trained by Dean and his staff. I really value what it brings to our community. My son, as the only 6th grader in the middle school play who had a lead role in this year's Addams Family. He played Pugsley. Dean was at front row there. He was at front row on the opening night of School of Rock and closing night of School of Rock for him. He's been a huge supporter, teaching and training him. And I really do believe the small community, the small classes, and the care that they give individually to each student. He never put my son aside to say he's great. He's always enrolled him in group classes or whatever is necessary. He pulled him aside for private lessons. My son has an agent. He does a lot of auditions, a lot of self-tapes. I can't tell you the value of those quiet rooms where, you know, I pick John up from school and bring him to the to PTW for him to be professionally videotaped so that it can go to LA or New York to all these directors and people. It's really incredibly valuable. I love them, and I am so happy that they're willing to move to Millburn, and I think they will be an amazing addition to our community, and I think it's so much value that we can't resist this. So
Thank
I
you.
hope you consider it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes. Rachel Braverman, Rachel, Braverman, Braverman, address 242 Hartshorn Drive, Short Hills. I'm married to Jeff. We have 4 little kids. As he was saying, I can't echo enough what's been said tonight. Everything Dean said is nothing but the absolute truth. I mean, these are 2 of the finest people who care so deeply about each of their students, from the smallest to the biggest, to the youngest talent to the biggest voice in the room. They are training their kids to be good people and good actors and good singers, and it's phenomenal to watch these children grow. And I think that bringing that into this community is such a feather in the cap of Millburn that it would be, I just think it's a beautiful thing to be able to bring home. And I think everyone here would be proud to have it. So I hope that this is a no-brainer for all of you.
Thank you.
Hi. I do. Sherry, Sheri, Friedman, Friedman, 162 Hartshorn Drive. I have 3 kids that are all teenagers now, a junior and 2 8th graders. One of the 8th graders is also a lead in the Addams Family with your son. And all of my kids have done a variety of all the different offerings over the years, whether it's at St. George's Church or the vocal recital, or the private lessons, or the professional track, or all the different opportunities to perform in a small setting, a caring setting. The atmosphere there is like none other. So it has helped my children grow in all areas. So I'm very excited. Even my son got a referral from Dean, and he got an agent as well. He did a professional voiceover, and he's had opportunities. All my children have opportunities because of the environment, and every teacher there is a high-quality teacher. So when I found out they could move to Millburn, even better. I love the idea of an empty building having occupants, and I think that they will take very good care of it, and it will really become another focus for the town. So that's all. I can't say enough. I agree with everything else said, and this should be an easy one.
Thank you.
I do. Thomas Macaulay, MCC, AULEY, 112 South Kingman Road, South Orange. I have to tell you right up front, I'm their realtor. So I'm just putting it out there. But I did want to tell you, I'm also the property committee chairman for St. George's Episcopal Church in Maplewood, where they have been caretakers and using our facility for a number of years. And I wanted to approach it on a little bit different slant, in that they take very good care of our building. And I think that's important because it represents, obviously, if they have their own building, it's going to be needing to be maintained and handled and look good as part of the community. So I wanted to approach it from that slant, that you know, from somebody that handles the building, that they've taken very good care of it, and their staff are very conscientious in that regard. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wendy, Wendy, Lee, Lee. 115 Fairfield Drive in Short Hills. So I just wanted to give a quick example of the heart of the school. So yesterday they had their end of the year show, and it was a busy day with 3 different age groups performing. And in the middle show, in one of the numbers, one of the kids' mics wasn't working. And so they made the decision that they were just going to do the number and then just to go ahead and repeat the number despite time delays and crunches. And they just really wanted every child to be heard. And that's really the heart of the school. That's what their message is: every child counts. I have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, and they've all gone through PTW. My son is still there, and it's their second home, and they love it. So I think it's the real deal, and they really belong here in Millburn Short Hills.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll close the public portion of the meeting. Members?
Well, here's another example of something that used to work in the community in the 80s, where we had a medical issue. We wanted to put medical down on that end of Millburn Avenue by 120 and 140, which are the medical buildings. But now that's gone away, and we have an application to repurpose it, and I think that it's a really good application for the community, and I would be happy to support it.
Anyone else?
I wanna know when I can sign my kids up.
Not until after you approve the resolution.
I think this would be a really, really wonderful addition to the community. I'm so happy, anytime we have an application like this that comes in, you know, it really would be a welcome, I think, a welcome addition to our town.
Is there a motion? Well, we should vote on the D1 use variance first. That requires 5 affirmative votes. Is there a motion?
Move approval of the D variance?
Second.
Yes.
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 Yes. So now we want to deal with all the other, I think we can deal with all the other variances.
And waivers.
And the
And waivers and site plan.
Yeah.
I move approval of the C variances and the stated waivers,
And the preliminary and final site plan.
and the preliminary and final site plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
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 Thank you very much, and especially all your time. Thank you.
Good luck.
We'll do you proud.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who has a matter to bring before the board?
I think the
That
lack
is
of
not on
air is what I'm hearing from the audience.
I hear none, see none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Oh my God, it's hot.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm never, like, I'm always cold, and
Yeah, but not this time.
it is really, really uncomfortably hot here.